Hey friends, before we dive into tonight's story, did you know that nearly 80% of the people who watch these videos aren't subscribed? If you're enjoying this kind of content, consider hitting the subscribe button. It really helps a lot, and it keeps these long stories going. Also, I'd love to hear from you. What time is it right now where you are, and which city are you listening from tonight? And if these stories help you sleep, feel free to tap the thanks button to support the channel. It truly means a lot. Alright, let's get into it. It was 2:03 a.m. when the silent alarm tripped at the old convenience store on Willow Avenue. I was less than 2 minutes away, cruising past the deserted strip mall in my patrol car, headphones still dangling around my neck from the last radio check. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the static. Silent alarm, 1040 Willow, officer on scene. I flicked on the overhead lights, eased the cruiser into the narrow driveway behind the building, and cut the engine. Night was too quiet for any real trouble. Just the distant hum of the highway, and the occasional drip of a leaking gutter. I stepped out, the cold air biting through my uniform as I retrieved my flashlight and radio. The exit signs were buzzing, their fluorescent glow rhythmically fading in and out, and the motion lights above the front door pulsed like a slow heartbeat. I announced myself on the radio again, voice low. Officer Parker on scene. Checking perimeter. I clicked off the mic, then walked the length of the building, flashlight beam dancing across cracked windows and faded out-of-service signs plastered on the front door. No footprints in the gravel, no broken glass, nothing but the scent of stale coffee lingering where the clerk used to brew after midnight. I exhaled, tapped the doorframe with my knuckles, locked. I half expected to find a sensor malfunction or some animal tripping the beam. That's all it ever was. Then, around back, I saw the open loading bay door. The metal flap was raised 3 feet off the ground, enough room for someone to slide through. My heart sped up. I flicked on the flashlight and crawled beneath the flap, pistol drawn now, voice steady. "Police! Show yourself!" Silence. No scurry of rats, no clatter of boxes, just my breath, the dry rustle of insulation, and the dim gleam of that warning sign above. Alarmed door, do not tamper. I eased forward, hand brushing against the cool concrete wall. The warehouse was layered in darkness, but for a single light suspended over a work table, flickering so slowly it felt like it might die at any moment. I clicked off the flashlight and switched to night vision on my goggles, the room becoming an eerie green haze. Cardboard crates were stacked haphazardly along the walls, some torn open, contents long gone, empty soda bottles, shredded packaging, and a single dented metal bucket forgotten in the corner. No sign of a forced entry other than that raised door. A soft click echoed behind me. I spun, pistol aimed into the deeper shadows. Out from between two crates emerged a figure, tall, lanky, shoulders slumped as if weight pressed down on him. He wore a grubby jacket and his head hung low, face obscured. I pounded the floor with my boot, hands where I can see them. He froze. I switched off night vision, switched the flashlight back on, and caught his eyes. Sunken, glassy, darting with a cruel intelligence. He raised one hand, trembling, and pointed at me. His knuckles turned white around something in his grip. I stepped back, heart pounding. "Drop it." But he only lifted the object slowly. It caught the beam, a slim, silver key. My brow knit. "What's with the key?" I asked. No reply. He tapped the tip of the key against the crate beside him, a metallic whisper that echoed in the silence, and then, softly, "It's theirs." I pressed my free hand to the radio mic. "Need backup at 1040 Willow. Possible trespasser armed with unknown object." The figure's head tilted, as if listening. His breath was ragged, shallow. I realized then that he wasn't standing fully upright, his legs bent inward, ankles turned. He moved oddly, like his body didn't trust his mind. He shifted weight from one foot to the other, key glinting. "Look," I said, voice low. "You and we can end this now. Just drop the key." He stared for a long moment. Then, in one fluid motion, tucked the key into his jacket pocket and raised both empty hands. Relief washed over me. I holstered my weapon to reach for cuffs. Cautious. Protocol. As I stepped closer, his eyes flicked to my sidearm and lingered. Something in his gaze reminded me of those calls we'd run years ago, the calls that felt off, that left a knot in my stomach. He shifted again, quiet as a cat, then turned on his heel and bolted deeper into the warehouse. "Stop!" I yelled, sprinting after him. The motion lights by the front door suddenly sputtered on, bright and harsh, illuminating a maze of crates and pallets. He ducked behind a stack, weaving between shadows. I could hear his ragged breathing, faster now. I rounded the final corner and there he was, crouched on the far side, backlit by the streetlight filtering through a high window. He held his hands out, palms up as if surrendering. I raised my flashlight, and what looked like thin metal rods clinked in his other hand, bundled together. My breath caught. "Drop them," I ordered. He didn't move. I stepped forward, radio dead silent. He studied me, expression blank, then whispered, almost breaking, "They told me to wait here." I blinked. "Who's they?" His head tilted, nostrils flaring, and he took a shaky breath as if trying to say more. The load of rods slipped from his fingers and tumbled across the concrete floor. Thin wires, maybe part of a sophisticated alarm system, cut in half. He sank to his knees, shaking so hard the metal squeaked beneath him. "I had to stop them," he said, voice trembling like ice cracking. "But they kept turning the lights off." That sent a chill down my spine. We're trained to think in threats, suspects, motives, but there was no weapon here, no clear danger, only a man broken by voices he seemed to hear. I reached out, hand hovering near his shoulder. "It's okay," I said, but my mind raced back to other calls. Officers calling in silent alarms at empty homes, kitchens smelling of fresh cooking, motion sensors tripped with no footprints. We chalked them up to animals, tech glitches. But what if there were people inside, hearing things we couldn't? The figure looked up, eyes glassy. "I just wanted to protect them," he whispered, jaw trembling. "But I shouldn't have cut the wires." Sirens sounded then, backup arriving. I moved to cuff him gently, guiding his hands behind his back. He didn't resist, but he didn't look at me either. He stared ahead at the blinking exit sign where the flicker seemed to speak in code. As they led him away, I knelt to gather the wires, tucking them into evidence bags. My chest felt tight. I radioed the dispatcher. "Subject in custody, no injuries, possible mental health crisis." The uniformed officer who rolled in asked if I was okay. I lied and said yes, but my stomach churned. Back in the cruiser, I sat for a long while, headlights off, engine idling. The warehouse lights blinked through the windshield, pulsing in the darkness. I tapped the side of my head, imagining the silence in his mind, the words he could hear that never came through my radio. The radio crackled. A routine check from dispatch about the next call. A false alarm at an empty school down the road. I drove off, siren silent, thinking how the wrong wires tripped a response that ended with a man in handcuffs. And what we never reported, his whispered reason, his fractured guilt, the moments his world stopped making sense. And I kept seeing my own flashlight reflection in those curved metal rods, unsteady, until I realized I had turned it off. I could feel the chill in the air before I even stepped out of the cruiser. It was 3:14 a.m. when the silent alarm at the old Edgewater storage warehouse lit up my dashboard. The call came through like any other. Alarm 2219 Industrial Drive. Officer to confirm. I parked under a lone floodlight that buzzed and sputtered, then killed the engine and grabbed my flashlight and radio. The warehouse sat at the far end of a long, cracked asphalt lot, its corrugated metal sides stained by years of rain and rust. A single motion sensor light above the main sliding door flickered weakly, throwing elongated shadows across the ground. I clicked onto the radio. Unit 6, Parker on scene, checking perimeter. My voice sounded tired even to me. It was a routine, too routine. I traced the outer wall with my flashlight beam. No footprints in the gravel, no tire marks, nothing out of place except that faint hum from inside. I crouched and peered under the door's gap. Darkness. Then I saw it. Tracks in the dust on the concrete floor, leading straight to the center of the building. I slipped inside, flashlight sweeping over stacked crates, abandoned pallets, and a row of silent forklifts. A line of red LEDs above the metal door indicator blinked, secure, but the door was cracked open a foot. I called out, "Police! Come out with your hands where I can see them." My voice sounded too loud in the emptiness, echoing off unseen rafters. No reply, just the hum of an unseen air vent and something else, a faint irregular drip of water somewhere deeper. I edged forward, pistol trained ahead, flashlight in my free hand. The beam caught a small pile of spare wires and connectors on a low workbench, bulbs of dried dust swirling in the light. Then I noticed the exit sign at the far end. Its power cable had been severed cleanly, dangling like a noose. Whoever came through here knew exactly what they were doing. My heart pounded. This wasn't a false alarm or a stray animal. I took 2 steps and froze. Something had shifted. A soft creak from my left, like a pallet settling under weight. I swung the flashlight beam and saw him, tall, thin, hunched over, as if folding himself smaller to avoid notice. He wore a grubby reflective vest, one of those security company throwaways. His eyes glinted in the beam, wide and unblinking. He held something in his hand that caught the light in sharp angles. "Show me your hands," I commanded, voice steady but breath coming quick. He tilted his head, clutching the object tighter. It was a small motion detector module, circuit board exposed, wires splayed like entrails. "It's theirs," he said softly, voice cracking. I lowered my pistol slightly. "Who's theirs?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he lifted one foot and wiggled it, showing boots caked in dried mud. He tapped the module against his palm. "They said to protect it," he whispered. I holstered my weapon, moving cautiously. "I'm here to help, just set it down." He shook his head, coils of dark hair falling over his face. His vest rustled. No silent words. His phrase froze me in place, because it was the same thing I'd heard on another call, months ago, at an empty school gym. They watch with no blinking lights. I recalled the entry. Motion sensors tripped despite no one being there. I'd written it off, faulty wiring, but his words echoed. He took a half step back, wires brushing against the concrete. "They move when I blink," he said. "I can't let them get it." A nervous laugh bubbled up, sharp and brittle. I swallowed and tried a different approach. "Why protect this? Who are they?" He didn't respond, just crouched and pressed the module to the ground. Sparks sizzled from exposed leads dancing across the floor. The smell of ozone filled the air. I flicked on my radio. "Dispatcher, I need backup. Possible trespasser with electronics." He looked up when the siren wailed in the distance, momentarily startled, then furious. He scooped up the module and bolted toward a narrow corridor between stacked crates. I chased him, footsteps echoing, heart slamming against my ribs. Around the corner he skidded to a halt, breath ragged, chest heaving. He held the module overhead like an offering. "I won't let them take it," he snarled. "Stop!" I shouted, raising my flashlight. "Put it down or I'll—" My voice trailed off because I realized I didn't know what he was protecting, and more frighteningly, who he meant by they. He ran again, weaving through shadows, wires trailing behind him like a severed lifeline. By the time backup arrived, he'd disappeared. We searched every corner, every crate, every duct, but no sign of him or the module. I submitted the report as a trespassing incident and moved on. But I still think about that half-heard whisper, the way the wires hummed in his grip, the conviction in his eyes. I wonder what he was protecting, and from whom. And every silent alarm I answer now makes me pause a fraction longer, listening for words that shouldn't be there. It was nearly dawn when the motion alarm went off at the old school gym on Maple Street, 3 nights after the warehouse incident. I was on coffee number 4, sitting in the break room with my partner, Officer Ruiz, when the call came through. Motion alarm tripped, East Wing corridor, subject unknown. I rubbed my eyes, feeling last night's warehouse hunt settle into my bones. I pressed the scanner. "Unit 6, I'll check it. Ruiz, cover me." He nodded, eyes red but alert, sipping his own coffee. We drove over in silence, the cruiser's tires crunching gravel as we pulled up beside the boarded-up entrance. The gym looked abandoned, windows painted over, the only light a single bulb glowing at the far end of the hallway. I grabbed my flashlight and pistol, my uniform coat snagging on the door frame as I slipped inside. The overhead lights had been disabled long ago, wires hanging like vines, and the emergency exit sign buzzed with intermittent life. I keyed the mic, checking East Corridor. Then I clicked it off and moved down the hallway, boots echoing against cracked linoleum. At the far end, the gym door stood ajar. I pushed it slowly. There was no break-in damage, just that soft red glow from the exit sign overhead. The basketball court was empty, the bleachers pulled in, and damp humidity clung to the air, smelling of mildew. I swept my light over the hardwood floor, then spotted footprints in the dust, barely visible, like faint ghosts. They led to the center of the court, where the student lockers stood against the wall, half open, doors swinging gently. I announced myself. "Police! Anyone here, stay where you are." No answer. I strained to hear anything beyond the hum of the light and my own breath. Then I felt it. A subtle vibration under my boots, like a low hum coming from behind the lockers. I edged closer, light aimed at the gap between 2 metal doors. My heart thudded. I shoved the door open. Inside was a cluster of wires taped to the back of the locker, leading into the wall behind. At the end of the bundle was a small motion sensor, its red LED blinking steadily. Whoever wired this had used the school's electrical conduit, tapping into live power. I pulled out a pair of cutters from my belt, standard-issue multi-tool, and clipped the wires. The LED died instantly. Relief flared, but as I stood up, the air shifted. Something flickered at the edge of the beam, a pale pair of legs stepping out from the shadow behind the bleachers. I leveled the flashlight. The figure was thin, wearing scuffed sneakers and old gym clothes, face turned away. I called out, "Freeze! Police!" He froze, then slowly turned, head tilted. For a moment, I couldn't see his face, just the flicker of light reflecting off something in his hand. I stepped forward, pistol drawn. "Drop it!" He held up a small, handheld radio, its antenna bent. He tapped the side, static crackling, then voice so faint I almost missed it. "They see me." My stomach dropped because I recognized that phrasing. "They see me," the way someone might whisper alarm codes in their sleep. I lowered the gun, but kept one hand on the grip. "Who are they?" I asked. He tilted his head, shoulders hunched so his entire body seemed to shrink toward the floor. "The lights?" He blinked twice. "They watch." I radioed Ruiz. "I have a subject. Mental health check, no aggression." My partner arrived then, flashlight sweeping. We approached from both sides, guns holstered but ready. The boy, if he was a boy, looked no more than 19, face pallid. He kept glancing behind him toward each exit as if expecting someone, or something, to slip through at any moment. "Sir, it's okay," I said gently. "We just want to help." He glanced at me, eyes wide, and then whispered, "I'm protecting them." I exchanged a look with Ruiz. "Protecting who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he raised the radio to his mouth and murmured, "You have to warn them." Then he dropped it, backing away toward the locker-lined wall. Every step rattled the thin metal doors. "Stop!" Ruiz called. But he kept moving, eyes fixed on the shadowed corridor behind us. I shifted my light to follow, heart pounding. The beam caught something. A strip of reflective tape on the boy's jacket, the logo of the same security company whose vest the man at the warehouse had worn. I swallowed hard. This wasn't a coincidence. "Officer Parker," I said quietly. "Remember the storage warehouse?" The subject had the same vest and talked about them. Ruiz nodded grimly. "Looks like part of a pattern." The boy reached the end of the corridor and turned the corner. I motioned for Ruiz to flank, but before we could move, he bolted down the hall toward the gym lobby. I sprinted after him, adrenaline flooding every nerve. The gym entrance was just ahead, doors boarded, windows dark. He skidded to a stop, chest heaving, leaning against the wall. His right hand dug into his pocket and pulled out a folded photograph. Edges worn, creased. He held it out. I grabbed the photo and unfolded it. It showed 5 faces, blurry but familiar. The faces of school staff, custodian, part-time security guard, vice principal, and 2 teachers. Underneath, someone had scrawled names. "They watch. Leave them be." My breath caught. I looked up. The boy's hands trembled. "He said they'd come if I cut the lines," he whispered. "He said I had to protect them." I examined him, gaunt cheeks, haunted eyes, and that same broken gait I'd seen at the warehouse. The 2 incidents were too close in pattern. Silent alarms, lone responders, whispered warnings about unseen watchers. I crouched next to him. "It's okay," I said. "We'll get you help. No one is coming." He blinked, voice wavering. "But they told me they were inside." His fingers curled around the photo, paper crumpling. I heard their voices. I radioed dispatch. "Need EMS and mental health crisis team at Maple Street Gym." Then I turned to Ruiz. "Secure the scene. I'll talk to him." My partner nodded, moving to block the corridor behind. I faced the boy again. "Look," I said softly. "I know you think you heard something, but you're safe now. You don't have to protect anyone." He flinched, eyes flicking toward the exit sign. The one light still hanging over the front door, buzzing softly, casting a sickly green glow. For a moment, we were both silent, listening to that hum, the distant siren of EMS approaching, and the echo of my own breath. He hugged the photo to his chest and sank to the floor, head bowed. As I kneeled beside him, I thought of the man at the warehouse and how I never did figure out what he was protecting. Now, here was another person trapped in the same fear, same compulsion, same whispered phrases I couldn't fully understand. I closed my eyes briefly, hearing my own voice in my head, tired and measured. They watch. You talk to me with no silent words. I opened them and met his vacant stare. "It's just us here," I said. "Just us." He looked up, tears gathering, voice barely audible. "I'm sorry." And for the second time in as many nights I realized I'd come for a false alarm, but found something far more broken, far more human, than any crime scene report could ever convey. I drove back to the precinct on autopilot, the gym incident still crawling under my skin, the boy's haunted stare, the way he clung to that photograph as though it was his last tether to reality. I couldn't shake it. My partner Ruiz offered to fill out the paperwork, but I asked to take the next call. Darkness felt safer than even the bright glare of overhead lights in the station. An hour later, as the sky turned a dull gray, the radio crackled. "Motion alarm, 412 Oak Ridge Lane." "Officer available?" I clicked in, Unit 6 en route. Oak Ridge Lane was a narrow dirt road that cut through farmland, lined with gnarled oaks whose branches interlocked like crooked fingers overhead. The rural calls were fewer, but when they came, I expected coyotes or a loose livestock gait, not this weight that had settled in my chest since midnight. By the time I arrived, dawn was bleeding through low clouds. The house was a modest ranch, white siding streaked with mildew. A single porch light glowed weakly, and a motion sensor light above flickered once as I pulled in. The yard was overgrown, grass tall enough to hide a body. I killed the engine, radio on, standby. No backup available. This was mine to handle. I stepped out, boots sinking into damp earth, flashlight and pistol drawn. The mist curled around my ankles. I announced my presence. "Police, Oak Ridge Lane. Anyone here?" Only silence answered. I circled the house, checking windows for broken glass, doors for pry marks. The back door was ajar, latch off its hinge. I steadied my breath. Inside, the air felt stale and cold, like the home had been sealed for weeks. My beam swept over dusty linoleum, peeling wallpaper, and a kitchen table littered with mail stamped weeks ago. No tripped sensors on a keypad. Someone had forced the door and shut the house's brains off at the breaker. I radioed dispatch. Possible forced entry. No visual on suspect. I moved through the living room into the hallway. The motion detector on the ceiling hung crooked, wires dangling. The sensor light was dead, but its red LED glowed faintly, as if the device itself was half alive. I flicked my flashlight onto it. It sparked, then died. Another silent alarm in my hand, powerless. I followed the hallway to the master bedroom door, cracked open. Inside, the bed was neatly made, nightstand symmetrical, lamps unlit. On the floor by the dresser, a series of muddy footprints led to the window. I knelt, shining my light. There, a single smear of dried blood on the windowsill. My pulse quickened. I called out softly, "If you're in here, keep your hands visible." No response. I cleared the dresser and found the wound. A shallow gash on the woman's porcelain vase, now shattered on the floor. They'd smashed it in the name of whatever they were after. I stepped outside for a breath, the mist thickening. Fields stretched on either side, empty barns sagging under years of neglect. I jogged around the house to the field side, heart hammering at each crunch of grass. At the south corner, I found the outline of a small shed, only the door ajar wide enough to slip through. I clicked off the flashlight and switched to night vision goggles. Still green haze, but better than nothing. My footsteps were silent in the shed's dirt floor. Inside, old tools lined the walls. Shovels, rakes, a rusted pitchfork. Then my light caught a shape in the center. A crude altar built of plywood planks, littered with broken electronics. Motion sensors ripped from their mounts, copper wires peeled, circuit boards splintered. Beneath the wreckage lay a worn teddy bear, its glass eye missing, stuffing poking through. My pulse stuttered. This was no random break-in. Someone had been here before me, dismantling every security device and leaving behind a grotesque shrine of wired corpses and childhood innocence. I swallowed hard, stomach turning. I reached for my radio, but a soft click made me freeze. "Help them," whispered a voice so low I thought it was the wind. I spun in place, pistol raised, but saw nothing, just mist curling around the shed's broken windows. I realized the voice had come from inside the teddy bear, the fabric twisted like lips. My throat tightened as I stared at it, heart slamming against ribs. "What am I supposed to do?" I called out, voice echoing hollow. No answer. I scanned the altar with my light. A row of nameplates hammered onto the wood, each bearing a neighbor's name, a child's bedroom light switch, a harmless listing that now felt ominous. Beneath each nameplate, a small dark stain streaked the plywood. I swallowed bile, breathing shallow. Somewhere behind the pile of sensors, something shifted. A slight rustle, a scrape of metal on wood. I edged closer, flashlight aimed at the back of the shed. Through the slats, I saw a pair of pale eyes staring at me from the farm field outside, unmoving. Then they blinked, twice, and disappeared. I yanked off the goggles, ready to fire, but nothing was there. Only the orchard beyond, shrouded in fog. The radio crackled from the cruiser, but each second felt like minutes. I hollered into the void. "I need backup. Possible intruder armed. Send EMT." No one answered. The line was dead. My finger hovered over the trigger. The shed felt alive around me, breathless with anticipation. I forced myself to step back. My reflection in the window pane was a pale stranger, pallid cheeks, haunted eyes where I once felt resolve. I strode out, breaking into a run, nearly tripping over the threshold. Once outside, I heard headlights approaching. Ruiz's cruiser, finally. I waved him down, relief flooding me. He got out, flashlight angled at the shed. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. "I think," I said. "But look at this." I led him inside. He scanned the altar, brows furrowed. "What the hell?" He touched the teddy bear, recoiling. "Someone set this up to scare us. Or warn us," I muttered. He shook his head. "We need to clear the rest of the property. You saw something out there?" I pointed to the orchard. Eyes pale, but I can't be sure. He radioed dispatch and took a position by the shed entrance. I circled the house, ushering out the startled homeowner who'd arrived behind us. She didn't say much, just clutched her robe, eyes wide as she saw the mess. I assured her we'd secure the scene and get her home soon. Inside the house again, I searched the bedrooms. Each window had been carefully opened, sensors ripped, wires severed. No sign of the intruder except that altar, that makeshift directory of names. I found a crumpled note on the nightstand, 5 lines scrawled in shaky script, matching the number of nameplates. The words, "Protect them from the Watchers." I dropped the note, lungs burning. Protect them. Whoever they were, they'd targeted this block, removing every device that might alert the world to their presence. Protect them from Watchers. It struck me then. Every location, the warehouse, the gym, now this farmhouse, alarms meant to keep intruders out had drawn the Watcher in. Ruiz found me in the hallway, flashlight in one hand, bloodless note in the other. "You okay?" he asked again. I exhaled, voice hollow. "I don't know. I keep expecting someone, something, to step out of the shadows. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "We'll get to the bottom of it." I nodded, though doubt churned inside me. As we waited for the crime scene unit, I stared at the broken teddy bear and evidence bag. Remembered the boy on Maple Street. Remembered the man in the warehouse who spoke of silent words. That day, reports would label it attempted breaking and entering, vandalism, maybe even a mental health arrest if we tracked down the culprit. But the truth, the way the voices crept between sensor wires, the way eyes blinked, at the edge of vision, would stay with me far longer. And as night descended again, I knew I'd never see a motion sensor the same way. I packed up, leaving the altar behind for technicians, but carried the note with me. 5 names, 5 warnings, 5 people I'd saved from watchers I couldn't see. And I wondered, who was truly the intruder here? The one tearing down alarms, or me, walking blindly into the dark? It was a week later when the dispatch crackled. Unit 6, silent alarm at 58 Pinecrest Drive. Residential alarm, possible faulty sensor. I clicked back, voice hollow. I'm en route. Pinecrest was a tidy street of mid-century homes, lawns mowed, white picket fences, street lamps at even intervals. Dawn was breaking, but the neighborhood felt suspended between night and day, half in shadow, half in pale gold light. The house at number 58 stood darker than the rest. Its garage light buzzed weakly, flickering as if unsure whether to stay on. I parked at the curb, radio on standby, heart still tight from the Oak Ridge Lane shed. I grabbed my flashlight and approached the front porch, noting the welcome mat askew. I called out, pistol at my side, "Police, check your alarm?" No answer. I unlatched the deadbolt, stepping inside. The foyer was neat, a coat rack with no coats, a console table with a single framed photo of a smiling family, mother, father, 2 kids. The oil lamp on the piano bench had been overturned, wax pooled on the floor. I crouched to examine it, then heard the faintest click behind me. I spun toward the hallway. The guest room door was cracked. "Police," I whispered, advancing. The light in the room was off. The only illumination came from the hall. I flipped on my flashlight. The bed was made, but the sheets were stained, something dark and sticky. A child's teddy bear lay face down on the floor, one eye missing. I swallowed, stepping forward. "Missed something?" a voice said, low. I trained my light on the corner and saw her, a woman, figure slender, dressed in a nightgown, eyes wide. Her hair hung in damp snakes around her shoulders. In her hand, she held a motion sensor, one we use on interior doors. The LED glowed red. "Ma'am, step away from that," I said. She tilted her head, lips parting. "They told me to show you." She tapped the sensor against her palm. I recognized those tremors, that same fractured urgency I'd seen 3 times now. "Who told you?" I asked. She made a soft sound, like a kitten yowling. Then she darted out of the room, motion sensor still in hand. I gave chase down the hallway toward the kitchen, radio crackling. I rounded the corner and she was gone, but the back door gaped open. Through it, I saw her silhouette at the garden's edge, twisting around a decorative fountain. She held the sensor up as if it were a fragile bird. "You have to protect this," she whispered. Then, just as the daylight caught her face, she vanished behind a hedge. I pushed through the landscaping, heart pounding, feet slipping on dew-soaked grass. At the hedge's end, I found a narrow path leading to the side yard, where security cameras once watched. Now, their housings were empty, lenses gone, cables yanked. Underneath lay scattered shards of glass and splintered circuit boards. I radioed for backup. By the time it arrived, she was far beyond reach, lost somewhere in the morning haze. The homeowner emerged then, eyes wide, pointing to the kitchen window. I've lived here 20 years. My alarms never go off unless my dog trips them. I nodded, though nothing I said would explain how every security device was dismantled. The ones she carried, the ones at Pinecrest, Maple Street, the warehouse. I walked her through the foyer again, noting overturned furniture in the living room, but no footprints except hers. Her imprint was light, almost gliding atop the carpet. Inside, I dusted for prints around the back door. None. I examined the torn sensors. Each model different, but all cut in the same precise way. Wires stripped clean. Whoever they were, they had intimate knowledge of alarm systems. I thought of the final words she'd spoken. "You have to protect this." I held the sensor in my gloved hand, weighed its small plastic shell and shattered circuit board. It felt impossibly important, but to whom? In the cruiser afterward, I stared at the silent alarm icon on my dashboard. I thought of her voice, the way her lips quivered, the way she disappeared when I reached out. Across Pinecrest, Maple, Willow. Every alarm I'd answered felt like a summons into someone else's fear. That night, I wrote the report as a malicious damage incident and missing person, noting mental health concerns. The sensor went into evidence. But in my pocket lay the homeowner's photo exactly like the one I saw in the foyer. Family of 4 smiling under perfect sunlight. She'd asked me at the door if I'd seen the picture on the console. I said no. She sighed, as if disappointed. Weeks passed. No charges were filed, no bodies found. But every midnight alarm now feels like a call to something deeper. An echo of voices I can't fully hear, a plea to protect the unseen. I still carry the sensor sometimes, rolling it between my fingers on long shifts. I trace the circuitry, remembering the soft click of her voice, the tremor in her hand. And I wonder, who is it I'm really protecting? The people in those houses, or the watcher that sent them scrambling? Because at the end of every silent alarm, I realize I'm the intruder in someone else's terror. A ghost answering their call, only to vanish again, leaving behind empty housings and fractured minds. And I'm left holding something I don't understand, in the quiet darkness, with no silent words to guide me. It was just past midnight when the call came through. Silent alarm at the old Riverside Church on Elmwood Drive. I was sitting at my desk, toes tapping against the scuffed linoleum, trying to will the ache out of my shoulders after weeks of late-night runs. The dispatcher's voice was flat. Unit 6, silent alarm, Riverside Church. Possible faulty sensor. I grabbed my flashlight and keys, feeling that familiar hollow knot tighten in my gut. The church sat on a rise overlooking the river, its stone facade half swallowed by ivy. Moonlight glinted off stained glass windows, casting fractured rainbows onto the pews inside. I parked on the gravel drive, engine idling, radio muted. No backup available. This one was mine. I clicked off the engine, shouldered my coat, and stepped into the cold. Every breath came in wisps of vapor. I approached the heavy oak doors, noticing the old lock had been pried. Wood splintered around the frame. My flashlight beam stabbed the darkness as I eased the door open and slipped inside. The sanctuary was silent, save for the distant drip of water from a leaky roof beam. Rows of empty pews faced the altar, where a single candle burned low. Wax pooled like tears on the stone floor. I swallowed. Why was that candle lit? I swept the light upward, catching flickers in the glass above, shadows dancing across the crucifix. I stepped forward, pistol unholstered, flashlight sweeping side aisles. No footprints on the tiled floor, no scattered hymnals, nothing out of place except that candle. I knelt by it, careful not to snuff the flame. A scrap of paper lay beneath. One word, handwritten in jagged script. Listen. I tucked the note into my coat pocket, rising slowly. Footsteps, a soft scuff, echoed behind me. I spun, light cutting through the gloom. There he was, the same man from the warehouse. His hair was longer now, unkempt, eyes sunken. He wore that same reflective vest, stained and frayed, and clutched a length of security cable, almost like a noose. He stared at me, mouth open as if to speak, but no sound came. "Drop it," I said, voice tight. He didn't move. I took a step forward. "Who are you protecting?" He tilted his head, wires jangling. Then, in that hollow voice, he whispered, "They need their voices." My heart thudded. "Their voices?" He nodded, slowly, then tapped the cable against the floorboards, and the sound echoed like a distant gasp. I realized then the church speakers had come to life, soft static turning into distant murmurs, overlapping fragments of conversation. Laughter, sobs, half-heard prayers. The walls themselves seemed to be talking back. I tried the intercom button on my radio. Nothing but that layered hum. The murmurs swelled, and I recognized them. The voices of the family from Pinecrest, the boy from Maple Street, the man in the warehouse, all calling for help, echoing through the church's aging PA system. My skin crawled. He raised the cable as if to tie it to the pulpit rail, then glanced at the flickering exit signs. "I can't let them take it away," he said, voice breaking. The wires in his hand pulsed with static as though alive. I moved cautiously toward him. "You don't have to do this," I said. "Let them go." He leaned forward, eyes wild. "They're inside the walls. They need to speak." He clipped one end of the cable to the pulpit and tugged it, testing tension. The murmurs quieted, then all at once stopped like a radio switched off. The silence that followed was thicker than any noise. I pressed the barrel of my gun against his chest. "Listen to me. No more alarms, no more wires. This ends now." He looked past me, eyes fixed on the altar's shadow. Then, "They'll never rest until they're heard." He backed toward the pulpit rail, pulling the cable tight. I took a deep breath, heart drumming. "Officer coming through," I said softly. "I'm here to hear them." He hesitated, shoulders quivering. The cathedral hush pressed in, as if the entire building held its breath. I lowered my weapon slowly and reached out. He flinched, but didn't move away. I placed a hand on the cable, feeling the electric hum under my glove. "Tell them I'm listening," I said, voice gentle. He stared, tears pooling. "Tell them." He trailed off, tension draining from his body. His shoulders slumped. He let the cable go, and it fell limp to the floor with a hollow clatter. The murmurs began again, soft, clear this time. A mother's lullaby, a child's laughter, a man's sorrowful confession. The candle flame flickered, and the church filled with light. He sank to his knees, weeping silently as the voices spoke and spoke. Confessions, regrets, pleas for forgiveness. I stayed beside him, flashlight trained on the cable, watching as he folded into himself, the burden lifting. For the first time all night, I felt less like an intruder and more like a listener, bearing witness to something no report could capture. Backup barreled in then, lights flashing, voices calling, but I held up a hand. "Not yet," I said. "Let them finish." The murmurs faded. The candle sputtered, then died, plunging the sanctuary into dim moonlight. He looked up at me, face streaked with tears. "Thank you," he whispered. I offered him my hand. "Come on," I said. "Let's go home." As I led him outside, the church stood silent once more, its stones washed in pale dawn. In my pocket, I kept the scrap of paper, "Listen," and I thought, Sometimes the alarms we answer aren't warnings of danger. They're calls for understanding, echoes of lives we never knew. I drove away from Riverside Church in near silence, the cruiser's engine a low hum beneath my thoughts. Dawn had broken fully by the time I pulled back into the station parking lot, pale light slanting across empty patrol cars and the chain-link fence. I killed the engine and sat for a long moment, hands resting on the wheel, replaying the night's events. The candle lit in the dark sanctuary, the man I'd first met at the warehouse now kneeling beside me in confession, the chorus of whispered voices filling those vaulted ceilings. I felt drained, untethered, like I'd spent the night casting my own shadow across others' fears. When I finally stepped out, my legs protested with every movement. The station lights flickered overhead as I trudged inside, uniform coat damp from the morning mist. I met Ruiz in the briefing room. He'd stayed late on paperwork and offered a nod that I hoped conveyed both gratitude and apology. He closed his folder, eyes unreadable. "You okay?" he asked softly. I shrugged, letting the question hang there. Silence, then. "Get some rest if you can. I'll take the watch." I left my gear with him, then climbed the stairs to my locker. In the metal drawer lay the scrap of paper from the church, "Listen," and the motion sensor from Pinecrest, all wires and dull LEDs. I'd tucked them into my pocket during a moment of absent-minded fear, then forgotten until now. I stared at those items as if they were talismans, proof that something else had happened beyond my reports. I folded the note carefully, slid it inside my fatigue jacket, zipped the pocket. The sensor came home too, nestled beside my badge case. That afternoon, sunlight slanted into my small apartment as I walked through the front door. I flicked on the lamp and sat on the edge of my bed, uniform hanging from the chair back. I stared at the sensor in my hand, tracing the etched plastic with a fingertip. My mind drifted back. The first warehouse alarms, the motion lights in the gym, the hacked devices at Oak Ridge Lane, the shattered altar of wires in the farmhouse, and now this final call at a church where ghosts spoke. Each moment had built on the last, like notes in a song I didn't know I was singing, until I felt trapped in a spiral. I placed the sensor on the nightstand and lay back, closing my eyes. Even in the silence of my bedroom, I could hear it. The soft, mechanical click of motion detectors, the hiss of voice static, that single word thrown at me in the foyer. Listen. A low vibration pulsed at the base of my skull, urging me to lean in, to tune the frequencies only they could speak. Sleep came in fits. I woke at 2:03 a.m. exactly, muscle memory. My mind conjured that same dashboard alarm light, blinking red. Dream or memory, I couldn't tell. I saw the reflective vest, tangled wires, candle flames, and the boy's photograph fluttering in windless air. I bolted upright, sweat slicking my chest. I reached out for the sensor on the nightstand, heart pounding, only to find the empty wood beside me. I sat in darkness, gasping until my pulse slowed. By morning, I'd resolved to turn the sensor in as evidence, to erase the physical reminders, and let the reports stand on their own. I dressed in quiet frustration, slipped the device into an evidence bag, and delivered it at the station. The clerk took it without a word. It vanished into the property room, catalog number decades from now. But that night I found myself slipping into habit, checking alarm logs on the laptop, clicking through timestamps looking for anomalies. I watched the trail of calls. 2:17 a.m. at Willow Avenue, 3:14 at Industrial Drive, 6:02 at Maple, Street 908 at Oak Ridge Lane, 11:53 at Pinecrest Drive, 1:07 at Elmwood Church. No obvious pattern until I overlaid them on a map, a spiral growing outward from the center of town. Each point connected by a line that curved, never repeated. I drew it by hand, pencil trembling, then stopped when the last line seemed to point directly at my apartment. I closed the laptop and stepped away, unsettled by how neatly the spiral encircled my own world. My world, the one I thought I was protecting by answering silent alarms, had been built around these calls, each a distress beacon from someone terrified, someone broken by voices only they could hear. But what if I'd misinterpreted everything? What if I hadn't been saving them, but answering an alarm that was never theirs to trigger? A week later, I found myself back in uniform, headlamp strapped under my cap, driving out to a newly installed sensor at the old mill on Highway 12. It was supposed to be a test, a brand new, state-of-the-art device, immune to false positives, wired straight to the dispatcher. When I arrived, I walked the perimeter, everything static and quiet save for the wind in the corroded metal siding. I waited. The sensor light blinked once, no alarm, then twice, 3 times. I tapped my radio. Unit 6, false reading on the north wall sensor. Requesting status. No reply. The light went dark. Then, in the hush, I heard it. A soft whisper so close I thought it was beside my ear. "You forgot to listen." My breath caught. I spun, flashlight cutting through night. Nothing. The sensor housing lay empty. No device, no wires. Just the carved letters on the metal plate. Listen. My heart seized. I realized I'd been so focused on protecting their voices, their unseen watchers, that I'd never paused to listen to my own. The alarm in my mind, the guilt pulses beneath my uniform, the frayed edges of my certainty. I turned off the flashlight, stood in darkness, and listened to my own breathing, until it felt like an echo behind my eyes, a silent alarm that insisted I was the one needing help, needing rescue from a spiral I'd drawn myself into. I leaned against the mill's cold wall, head bowed, uniform gleaming faintly in the glow of a distant streetlight. And in that moment, I knew the final alarm wasn't outside. It was inside me, and it would never stop ringing. I hadn't slept much after that night at Riverside Church. The realization that the final alarm rang inside me stayed front and center. Its pulse was the ache in my chest, the flicker behind my eyes whenever I closed them. A week passed in a blur of paperwork I barely remembered and shifts I couldn't stay awake for. I drove patrol with the radio off, listening only to my tires on wet pavement, my own slow breathing through the ventilation system. Every time I passed a blinking light or a motion sensor housing on someone's home, I felt its eyes on me. Then the call came at 4:12 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Unit 6, repeat alarm at 2219 Industrial Drive. Warehouse sensor tripped again. My stomach pitched. That was the site of the first call, the warehouse where the man with the silver key vanished into the shadows. I didn't want to go back, but I couldn't refuse. My partner was off. I was solo on the truck. I flicked on the siren for the first time in days, half hoping it would wake me from this nightmare. When I arrived, the warehouse loomed under a swollen, dark sky. Its corrugated sides were slick with rain, and the lot was empty, save for the puddles catching the glow of the security light overhead. The same single floodlight buzzed and sputtered, limping on as if it, too, was reluctant to witness whatever happened next. I parked, unholstered my pistol, and clicked on the flashlight. The metal door was closed this time, no crack beneath it, but the sensor housing above it blinked once, twice, then went dark. I keyheaded the microphone. Unit 6 on scene, checking for signs of entry. No answer. That call had gone out on the wrong channel, and dispatch was busy elsewhere. I pried the door up with my boot, then slid under the lip, flashlight beam slicing through the gloom. The warehouse was unchanged, stacked crates, forklifts parked as if abandoned mid-shift, and that lonely work table in the center with its single light flickering. But something felt different. The air was heavy, as if thickened by anticipation. I swept my beam across the floor. No footprints at the entrance. I traced the tracks I remembered. A single line of dusty footprints that led to the far wall where the loading bay door had been ajar last time. My heart hammered. I moved slowly, scanning, recalling every detail from 6 nights ago. When I reached the back, I saw it. The door was open again, but wider, enough for someone to move in or out without ducking. I paused at the threshold, breathing shallow. In the corner by the hydraulic frame, I spotted a coil of wire lying in a loop, same gauge as a security cable, but cut neat, the ends scorched black. I knelt, running a finger along the melted plastic, trying to remember when I'd last felt so cold. The warehouse light flickered overhead and died, plunging me into near darkness. I flicked off the flashlight and switched on night vision goggles, the world turning flat green. That's when I heard it, the soft hum of voices, whispering in unison. They came from every direction at once, a low, insistent chant that made the hair on my neck stand on end. I swallowed, voice caught in my throat. My training said suspects, contraband, false alarms, but this was neither. I edged toward the sound, pistol raised but trembling. The voices led me to the work table. There, scattered across the metal surface, were dozens of motion sensor modules, one for each alarm I'd answered over the past week. They rested on a bed of tangled wires, like electronic offerings, their LEDs blinking in sync. 1, 2, 3, pause, 1. The whispering pulsed in time with those blinks. I felt bile rise in my throat. Then a figure emerged from the shadows. Tall, bent, familiar. It was the boy from Maple Street, the one who carried a radio in the gym. His eyes were wide, haunted, and he held a sensor in each hand, arms outstretched as if presenting them to me. Behind him, the mangled altar from Oak Ridge Lane had been reconstructed here. Boards nailed together, sensors affixed beneath nameplates. And at the center stood the reflective vest man, kneeling, eyes fixed on the boy's offering. They both looked up when I switched on my flashlight. The boy's face was drawn and pale, cheeks hollow. "You came back," he said softly. The man nodded, visor trembling in the light. "We saved them," he whispered, voice frail. I swallowed, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. What is this?" My words felt inadequate. The boy set down the sensors carefully, each one echoing a tiny click. Then he spoke. "They showed me how to save the others." He gestured to the table. I swallowed. Why here? Why bring them all together? The man rose slowly, hands still trembling. "Because now you listen," he said. "You saved their voices." The chant rose again, louder now, and I realized it was my voice. The recordings of me calling for help, radio check, reporting sensor trips, spliced and looped, echoing from hidden speakers in the rafters. Every word I'd ever spoken on those calls was playing back at me, layered and distorted. My own voice had become the chorus. Fear slammed into me. This wasn't a warning, it was a reckoning. The boy took a step forward, holding out one sensor. "Place this," he said, pointing to a spot at my feet by the man's vest. I knelt, heart in my throat, and laid the device on the concrete floor. As I did, the man reached out, slipping his hand around mine, guiding me to connect its wires. Sparks sizzled where the contacts met. I felt a jolt, not of electricity but of recognition, like flipping a switch inside myself. The chanting stopped. The LEDs blinked off. Silence crashed over me so fiercely I stumbled backward. The boy and the man looked at each other, then back at me, faces calm, relieved. "They can rest now," the man said, voice stronger. I stood and backed away, flashlight shaking in my hand. Who are they?" The boy's lips curved in a small, sad smile. "Neighbors," he said. "They needed you to hear." Then, as I watched in disbelief, the two of them turned and walked deeper into the shadows, fading until they were gone, leaving the warehouse empty once more. The work table stood abandoned, the sensors silent. I crouched and gathered the modules, tucking them into my jacket as evidence, but they felt weightless. Outside, the floodlight buzzed back to life and the warehouse doors clanged shut behind me, sealing whatever had just transpired into darkness. When I reached my cruiser, hands still trembling, I called dispatch. Unit 6, Code 4, no further assistance needed. My voice sounded hollow, a ghost in my own radio channel. I sat, taking deep breaths, trying to steady my racing heart. Then I looked down at the sensors in my lap, 6 in total now, 1 for each location. Willow Avenue, Industrial Drive, Maple Street, Oak Ridge Lane, Pinecrest Drive, Elmwood Church, and now this warehouse. 7 points on a spiral that began and ended with me. I realized then that the final alarm wasn't in any building. It was inside me, an echo of every call, every failure, every desperate plea to understand what lay beyond a false alarm. And now, with every device gathered, the spiral was complete. I started the engine and drove away, headlights carving through fog, sensors pressed against my chest. I didn't know where I was headed, home, the precinct, somewhere in between. But I carried their voices with me, a chorus I could no longer ignore, a silent alarm that would follow me until I listened. I drove in a haze all the way back into town, the 7 modules pressed against my ribs like a second heartbeat, 1 for each location, 1 for each silent alarm that had beckoned me into the darkness. By the time I rolled into the precinct parking lot, dawn was breaking in bruised purples and pinks, but my world still felt walled in by night. I killed the engine and sat there a long moment, chest tight. I didn't want to touch the sensors again, didn't want to be reminded. Yet I knew I would, whenever my hands reached into my coat pocket and closed around their cold plastic shells. Inside the station, the fluorescent lights felt harsh, whirled away from the dim sanctuary of that warehouse. I flicked on my badge light and let the modules fall, one by one, into evidence bags. Each thump on the metal table echoed in my skull. My fellow officers glanced up as I passed. I could see the questions already forming in their eyes. "What did you find?" But no words came. I simply slid the bags across to the property clerk, who nodded and swapped them for paperwork I barely read. 7 items logged, 7 incidents unresolved. I ducked into the locker room, peeled off my uniform coat and hung it on the hook. My reflection in the mirror startled me. Pale circles under my eyes, hair mussed by nights without sleep, that haunted look of someone who's seen too many empty rooms. I splashed cold water on my face, hoping to wash away the residue of whispers and footfalls, and that final vision of the boy and the man folding into shadow. But the water on my cheeks stung with cold guilt, and when I blinked, I saw, briefly, those pale eyes in the glass looking back at me. I dressed in plain clothes, heart still pounding. I needed air, needed distance before I could think straight. Outside, the morning was bright and ordinary, mail trucks humming, joggers along the sidewalk, a dog walker greeting me with a nod. I raised my hand, forced a small smile. What could I say? That I'd just witnessed the ledger of people's fears woven into a spiral of broken alarms. that I'd become the unwitting curator of their shattered voices. I climbed into my personal car and pulled out the note from Riverside Church. Listen. It was folded thin, edges frayed, ink smudged. I read it again and again. Listen. How had I failed to heed the simplest instruction? I realized then that every part of me had only been half present, cataloging evidence, ticking boxes, reporting sensors tripped and trespassers detained. But I had never truly listened. To the voices in the static, to the tremor in the boy's whisper, to the candle's plea when it burned in a silent sanctuary. I'd been deaf, chasing alarms, when what they needed was someone to hear. My phone's screen lit up, a text from Ruiz. Coffee? I've got questions. I thumbed back. Be there. I drove to our usual diner, that little booth by the window in the corner. We slid into the seats, mugs of black coffee set before us, steam curling between us like mist. He looked me in the eye. So, you okay? His voice was gentle, concerned. I stirred sugar into mine, not answering right away. Outside, traffic eased past, oblivious. I've been thinking, I said finally, about the spiral. I tapped the back of my hand against the table. All those alarms. It wasn't a pattern of locations. It was a map of us. Ruiz frowned. Us? I nodded, voice low. Our community. Every sensor taken down, every device dismantled. It wasn't just random vandalism. Someone, or something, wanted the people in those places to speak, to be heard, without the interference of cameras or blinking lights. They wanted confession, vulnerability, real voices. Ruiz leaned back, arms crossed. So you think these incidents were orchestrated confessions? I shrugged. Maybe not by a single puppeteer. Maybe it was the collective fear, the guilt of living behind alarms, sensors, doors locked tight. The alarms reminded us we were never alone, paranoid watchers in our own homes. But when the alarms fell silent, the people inside found a raw space to speak. I tapped the note again. Listen. It makes sense in a way. The boy in the gym confessed he thought he was protecting voices no one would hear. The man in the warehouse had that silver key he'd stolen from who knows where, key to some locked-up secret. The lady at Pinecrest cut her sensors because she heard whispers behind the walls. Ruiz opened his mouth, then closed it, considering. And you? He asked quietly. What do you confess? I stared down at the coffee, saw my tired reflection in the dark surface. That I never really listened. I treated it all like false alarms, glitches, trespassers, mental health runs. But these weren't glitches, they were signals. Calls for understanding that I shrugged off until they converged into one loud, insistent chorus. I paused, voice catching. The final alarm was inside me, the one that reminded me I was part of it all, part of the fear, the isolation, the guilt. He slid me a napkin. So, what now? I pressed the note into my palm. I don't know. I thought, once I gathered all the sensors and connected the dots, I'd have answers, but I only ended up more tangled in questions. I need to learn to listen, for real. I folded the note and tucked it into my pocket. We drank our coffee in silence, letting the morning pass. Then he said, "You'll figure it out, you always do." I nodded, uncertain. The diner's door chimed as customers came and went, mundane and unremarkable. But I saw the world differently now. A place of hidden voices, of alarms not meant to warn, but to free. Of people desperate to speak their truths without glass and metal between us. I left a cash tip, and we walked out into the sunshine. I felt the weight of that last sensor jammed in my pocket, the note folded flat beneath my keys. I slipped behind the wheel, started the car, and paused. In the rearview mirror, I saw the reflection of the diner's window, the people gathered inside, none of them aware that they too might carry silent alarms beneath their skins. I exhaled and turned onto the street, engine rumbling. It was almost noon. My shift hadn't even begun, but I didn't feel dread anymore. I felt something else, a cautious hope. Maybe listening was enough. Maybe that small act could untangle the spiral. Maybe the final chapter wasn't written yet. I straightened my jacket, gripped the steering wheel, and drove toward home, knowing I'd have to return to those places. To the warehouse, the gym, the farmhouse, the church, and sit in the quiet, ready to listen. I thought I'd reach the end when I sat with Ruiz over coffee, when I filed the last sensor, when I let the boy and the reflective vest man vanish into that warehouse's dark. I imagined that collecting their pieces, the broken modules, the torn wires, the whispered confessions, was enough to close the spiral. But the spiral never closes. It coils tighter inside you long after the alarms stop, and all you have left are echoes. That evening, after my shift finally ended, I went back out alone. First to Willow Avenue, where the convenience store's exit sign still buzzed in the dark. I crouched beneath that flickering motion light, flashlight beam aimed at the dusty parking lot. No key, no stranger in a vest, no voices, just the empty air, humming with the residue of every false alarm I'd ever answered. I knelt in the gravel, listening for anything beneath the chirp of insects and the distant roar of traffic. I felt ashamed that I'd believed the spiral could be solved on paper, that the answers lay in reports and maps. The answer lay here, in the silence, in the space between notes. I closed my eyes and at last really listened, but I heard nothing. Or maybe I heard too much. The rasp of my own heartbeat, the tingle of surveillance cameras I'd never seen, the hum of electricity beneath my feet. Next, I drove to Industrial Drive, the warehouse, though they'd sealed it up. I circled the perimeter in my cruiser, watching for movement, but saw only shadow and shuttered windows. The floodlight limped, but I flicked it on manually, standing beneath its glare, feeling like an imposter. I remembered the coil of wire, the module lit in that corner, the hush of static voices urging me on. There was no module now, only metal siding and my breath in my ears. I raised my hand and smacked the siding. "I'm listening," I whispered. The metal vibrated under my palm, as if a giant unseen heart beat behind it. I heard the hollow thud of boots inside, my boots, and traced the echo to a single boarded-up window. I pressed my ear to the boards. No whistle of wind, no ghostly confessions, just my reflection in a lone shard of glass, distorted and pale. I pulled back, repelled and relieved. By midnight, I was back on Maple Street, slipping into the corridors of that empty school gym. The lockers stood sentinel, though their wires were long since snipped and carted away. I ran a hand over each metal door, searching for grooves, for faded scratch marks, for something to tether me to human presence. My fingertips found tiny dents, maybe from a nervous knuckle, maybe from a fist pounding, maybe from someone who listened too hard. I knelt at the center of the court, flashlight down, watching the beam circle like a slow lighthouse sweep. I spoke aloud. "I'm here. Speak if you want." My voice roamed the rafters. An echo answered, but it came from inside me, a soft loop of my own words playing back, cobbled together from my radio log. I shut my eyes against the sound, but it slipped through bone and muscle until it felt like a chant, and I realized I was both listener and voice, watcher and watched. I scrambled to my feet, heart slamming, and fled the bleachers, breath rattling like broken glass. I hit Oak Ridge Lane next, the farmhouse, The altar of shredded sensors and that damned teddy bear turned shrine. I walked the yard slowly, boots sinking into damp grass, staring at the foundation where footprints encircled and vanished. No tools, no altar, just broken. Concrete and weeds clinging to metal stakes. I brushed dirt aside and found a single copper wire, half buried, still hot to the touch. It hummed in my hand. I wrapped it around my finger, careful of the burn, and felt a vibration, like a soft pulse, under my skin. It was the sound of 100 alarms I'd never heard, all tripped at once, all crying out. And me, the constable, the confessor, standing mute. Pinecrest Drive was easier. I walked the porch, tapping dead latches and peering through curtained windows. The resident greeted me at the door, surprised, anxious, the same look I'd seen on the boy, on the man, on the woman. I said, "I'm here to listen." He stepped back, confusion flickering, and I saw fresh wires taped to the framework, leading into the wall. They decomposed, frayed. He hadn't removed them all. They led to a hidden crawl space beneath the floorboards. I pried a board up and leaned in, wind rushing past me through damp soil. Inside was a small wooden box, lid cracked, filled with Polaroids. Photos of me responding to calls, one for each alarm location. My face in the beam of a flashlight. My name printed on each border. He'd been collecting me as much as I'd been collecting him. I scraped a hand through the box, lifting each photo as if reading a confession. He cried quietly behind me, and I turned, putting a hand on his shoulder. He sobbed, "I just wanted you to hear me." By now, it was close to 5 a.m. I knew I had one final stop, the church. Riverside Church, where the voices had finally broken loose through the speakers. I drove there deliberately, storm clouds gathering, wind pushing rain into my windshield. The doors swung open when I pressed them, as though expecting me. Inside, the pews were empty, the altar dark. The microphone and speaker system lay dismantled on the chancel steps, wires gaping from the walls like veins. I stepped forward, flashlight sweeping the stained glass. Each panel showed a face from those photographs. A custodian, a teacher, a mother, a father, a boy, a man, a woman. The glass was shattered in places, as if light itself refused to pass through. I crouched and touched the fragments, bleeding my fingerprints across holy images. Then the soft drum of footsteps from behind. I turned to see a figure in the moonlight. Me. Another me, mirrored, wearing my uniform, carrying a flashlight. He nodded, calm. "You listened," he said. I swallowed, heart seized. "I did," I replied. He stepped forward and placed a sensor in my hand. One more, though I thought there were only 7. Its LED flickered weakly. "This is the last," he said. "But the final alarm is yours alone." He faded then, dissolving into shadow, leaving me clutching that sensor, its light pulsing in my palm. The church door banged shut somewhere behind me. I walked into the rain, leaving that sensor on the stone steps, its flickering glow swallowed by darkness. I didn't wait to see if it died. I stepped into the night and let the wind wash over me, cold and fierce. In my mind, I still heard the whispered chorus, not from them, but from myself, reminding me that every alarm, every call, every silent plea was part of the same song. A song about fear and guilt, about isolation and confession, about needing someone to really listen. I realized then that the spiral wasn't meant to close. Its purpose was to open me up, to break me in half until I could no longer hide behind my uniform, my reports, my codes. The watchers had done their work, and so had I. As the rain soaked through my coat, I felt it. The weight of every silent alarm I'd ever answered. Every voice I'd ignored, every confession unrecorded. It settled in my bones, an unending echo behind my chest, a pulse that would never still. It was 2:03 a.m. The console glowed with that familiar red blink. Silent alarm, rear service door breach. Dispatch had flagged it as likely false. The station had been closed for weeks, boarded windows and all. But I'd learned early not to assume anything at night. I'd been on the road for 10 hours already, and by then, every false alarm felt like a trap. The highway behind me hummed with distant traffic, headlights tracing the horizon like slow ghosts. I switched on the overheads and eased onto the gravel, boots crunching once as I stepped out. The wind was mild, carrying the stale scent of fuel from the pumps. One flickering bulb above the storefront cast a shallow pool of gold across cracked concrete. The rest of the station was painted in shadows, half lit at best. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, empty lot, empty pumps, exit sign humming with that tinny buzz. I checked my watch again, 2:05 a.m. I radioed dispatch, voice low. Code 2 response. No footprints in gravel, doors locked from inside. No reply. They'd done with me until the next alarm. I walked toward the back door, flashlight grazing the peeling paint, the warped wood beneath. Motion sensor light pulsed overhead, but refused to stay on like a hiccup. I tapped the handle. Locked. No pride marks, no scrape of metal. If someone had forced entry, they'd come prepared. I circled the building's perimeter, eyes on the windows. Each glazed pane was frosted over with grime. None showed movement. Yet I felt watched. The air pressed against me, like someone breathing at the nape of my neck. Halfway around, I noticed tire tracks. Fresh, narrow, 2 parallel lines in muddy grass leading to the loader shed at the rear. I bent low, ran a gloved finger across the groove. Tire tread of a compact sedan, not a pickup. Odd choice for someone sneaking into an abandoned gas station. I straightened and swept my beam up. The shed door hung ajar, hinges creaking faintly in the breeze. I radioed backup. Possible unauthorized entry in rear shed. 3 minutes ETA. No answer again. Dispatch must have been slammed. I eased toward the shed, flashlight raised. The beam caught a rusted shovel leaning in the corner, blade caked with dried mud. I stepped in, boot crunching on broken glass. The stale air smelled of oil and rot. My breath fogged just a little, though it wasn't cold enough to warrant it. At the far wall, I caught movement. A dark shape huddled behind a stack of crates. My heart picked up. "Police?" I called. "Show yourself." Silence. The shape shifted. I clicked the flashlight off, trusting my night vision instincts, and drew my sidearm. "Drop whatever you're holding." The shape remained still, then slowly unfurled, hands raised, palms empty. A woman, early 20s, disheveled coat, eyes wide. Her lips quivered. "Please," she whispered. "I just needed a phone. I got stuck out here." That threw me. No cell service in this part of town. And why would someone hide in a shed to make a call? I holstered my weapon. "You okay?" She nodded, tears pooling. "My car," she started, but her voice caught. I shone my torch on her face. Smudged mascara, hollow cheeks. "Where's your car?" I asked. "Down the road," she said, voice shaking. I thought I heard someone following me. I guided her out, patting her down quick, no weapons. Her coat pocket had a single crumpled tissue. I led her around the corner, scanning the lot. No car in sight. "Why here?" I said quietly. She shook her head. I don't know." Her eyes flickered behind me. I swept the torch again, then saw it. fresh footprints leading from behind the station toward the interstate guardrail, then disappearing into weeds. "Wait here," I said, pointing to the shed. I ducked behind the corner of the building, heart hammering. There, half buried in grass, sat a cell phone. Screen smashed, battery hanging loose. No case, no ID. I pocketed it. Evidence, maybe. The wind shifted, and I heard it. A low scrape of metal, like someone dragging something heavy. I scanned the ground, nothing. I edged closer to the rear fence. The wire mesh was cut, frayed edges glinting under the shed light. I pulled out my radio. No signal. My hands felt slick. I tapped the knife in my coat, a small multi-tool. I snipped through more mesh and stepped beyond. The grass was tall, the ground soft from recent rain. I followed that scrape, crunching through wet blades until I hit pavement. A forgotten access road leading to an industrial park. One amber street lamp flickered at the far end. As I moved toward it, I felt a prickle. The station now behind me, its alarm silent again, as though it had never rung. At the lamp, I saw a dark stain on the asphalt, reddish-brown, half-washed by rain. I shone my light, discarded gloves, torn and blood-smeared. I took a step back. My stomach churned. Footprints nearby, distinct heel-to-toe impressions heading deeper into the park. Through rusted gates, beyond crates and dumpsters, I heard it. A soft hum, like machinery running out of sight. I radioed for backup again, voice tense. "Officer down, no, not me. Possible victim at Industrial Park off exit 45, blood at scene." As I spoke, footfalls echoed. Heavy boots, slow. I spun, heart in my throat, gun leveled. Nothing but shadows leaning against metal walls. The humming faltered. The air smelled of rust and oil. Then a voice, low, calm. "You shouldn't have come here." I peered into the gloom. No face, just a dark outline. The hum resumed, closer now. I barked, "Show yourself!" There was a pause, then a shuffle. I fired a warning shot into the concrete. Echo rolling like thunder. Silence. Backup crackled in through the radio. "Unit 22 en route. ETA 2 minutes." Good. I squared my shoulders, trained on the shape. Every instinct screamed to run, but I held my ground. The humming stopped. The only sound was my own breathing, ragged, and the faint click of something metallic behind me, like a shutter snapping. I didn't dare look back. I stayed locked on the shadows, finger on the trigger. Then, as the first siren split the night, the outline dissolved into the darkness. And I realized I was the last soul out here. The station alarm never rang again after that night, and dispatch eventually marked it false. But sometimes, when I'm parked on shift, I swear, I feel a breath on my ear, and I hear that mechanical hum, reminding me that some alarms go unanswered, and some calls never get reported. The world beyond that single lamp was silent. The shriek of the siren faded into distant echo as I searched the gloom. Every muscle coiled. I stepped forward, boots sinking into the gravelly earth, and the smell of oil and damp metal pressed in on me. Behind me, the faint red glow of the station alarm taunted me. Still silent, though I'd heard nothing more from inside. My radio crackled once, then fell silent again. Backup was still minutes away. I followed the heavy boot prints deeper into the industrial park, each step stirring up the scent of rust and oil. The outline of warehouses loomed, their corrugated steel walls warped by time. In the shadow of one, I saw a door slightly ajar, hinges creaking as though someone or something nudged it from within. I raised my flashlight, its beam narrow against the blackness, and peered inside. Rows of empty shelving greeted me, dust motes dancing like tiny specters in the light. At the far end, a strip of concrete stained darker than the rest caught my eye. As I moved closer, I saw flecks of red, dried blood spatter that trailed along the floor and up onto a stack of wooden pallets. My pulse bounced. I radioed in again, voice hushed. "Blood trail inside warehouse. Be advised. Possible hazard." Static answered me. I edged around the pallets, scanning for movement. Nothing stirred. My flashlight caught a glint of metal, a utility blade. Its handle snapped, blade extended like a broken tooth. I pocketed it, careful not to contaminate the evidence, and pressed on. The trail led me to a low doorway cut into the far wall, an afterthought entry to a back room. Stepping through, I entered a cramped office space. The walls were lined with dusty file cabinets, papers scattered in disarray. One desk sat overturned. Papers fluttered like wounded birds across the floor. Underneath, a small pool of darker fluid spread, sticky and congealed. I knelt, pressing a finger to the edge, thick, viscous. I snapped a photo with my phone, hoping it had enough light, then rose. A faint click echoed ahead. I froze. The office door latched shut behind me. I swung my light toward it, no handle on this side. The latch clicked again, as though someone was watching me from the other side. My breath shot out. I should have retreated, but something compelled me forward. I backed against the wall and pushed the door with both hands. It gave way with a soft groan. Outside, the blood trail resumed, leading across a small courtyard toward a set of rusted loading docks. I climbed the short ramp, each step echoing hollowly. The dock doors were shut, but one had been forced open, metal warped, latch bent outward. I pushed it slowly, gun raised. The flashlight beam revealed darkness thicker than the night outside, as though the building itself swallowed light. Inside, conveyor belts stood idle, machines silent. A faint hum resonated, as though something mechanical still lived here. I moved deeper, sweeping the beam across the floor. More footprints, many of them smeared, as though someone dragged a heavy object. My heart thudded against my ribs. Then I saw it. 2 lengths of blood-stained tarpaulin folded on the floor, straps trailing. I swallowed, nauseous. I radioed dispatch. 2 tarps secured. Backup, urgent. No response. I was alone again. I unholstered my flashlight and stepped around the belt. The hum grew stronger, vibrating through the metal grating underfoot. At the far end, a door marked generator room sat slightly ajar, a faint, oscillating red glow spilling out. I advanced, each footstep echoing, until I stood in its threshold. Inside, 2 generators towered, wires snaking like serpents. The glow came from the control panel, lights blinking red in rapid sequence. On the floor lay another pool of that dark fluid. Near it, a single motion sensor hung loose from the wall, its wiring severed. I knelt, shining my light. The red glow reflected in a small mirror propped against the panel. I tilted my head and saw my own face, pale, sweat beating at my temples. A sound behind me made me spin. Footsteps, bare, dragging. I aimed my light at the doorway. The beam caught a shape. A man, slumped against the jamb, clothes soaked in blood, eyes open but unfocused. He moaned softly, reaching out. I holstered my gun and knelt beside him. His fingers closed around mine, cold and trembling. They came for me," he whispered. "Said I shouldn't have called." My radio crackled alive, backup at last. Relief washed over me as I reached for my cuffs to secure him for medical aid. The man's grip tightened, panic flickering in his eyes. Behind him, the mirror caught motion. A second figure standing just beyond the glare, half hidden in shadow. I stood slowly, heart racing, voice low. "Stay there." I shone the light toward the figure. It vanished. I took a step forward. Empty space. The generator's hum rose to a crescendo. The injured man screamed, lurching to his feet and darting past me, stumbling into the corridor. I chased after him, slipping on spilled fluid, gun sliding from its holster. He reached the loading dock and vaulted into the darkness, vanishing beyond the open door. I skidded to the edge of the dock, peered into the night but saw nothing. Only the throb of distant traffic and the steady pulse of that unearthly hum. I radioed frantically. Suspect fled into night. Multiple injuries, possible accomplices. I need medics at generator room, and let's do a sweep of the perimeter. Sirens wailed in the distance. As I turned back inside, the mirror caught my eye again. This time, though, the reflection showed not one, but two figures standing behind me, shadowy, indistinct. My breath caught. I spun, but there was only empty hall. When I looked back at the mirror, it was empty too, just my own wide-eyed stare staring back. The hum faded, leaving silence heavy as death. I knelt to pick up my flashlight, hands shaking. The tarps lay untouched. The control panel lights blinked one last time, then went dark. In the quiet, I heard a soft click, like a camera snapping. I froze, listening. Nothing. I waited for backup in the generator room, door locked, gun in hand, mind racing. The man was bleeding out somewhere, alone, and whoever had done this was still out there. When the medics arrived, they rushed past me without a word, drawn to the haunting sight of gore and machinery. They worked in silence, and I handed them my radio, voice hollow. Scene secure. I left the park with that hum still in my ears. The station alarm never blinked again. The tapes from the security cameras were wiped inadvertently, they said. The report concluded, unknown suspect, but I never forgot the mirror, or the reflection that wasn't mine. Sometimes I wonder who called that shed night after night before I arrived. Who led the girl to hide? Who dragged those tarps? And whose eyes watched me from that control panel mirror, smiling in the dark. It was nearly 1:17 a.m. when my radio crackled again, silent alarm at the closed Oakwood convenience, 3 miles west of the train tracks. I'd been processing evidence from the industrial park all morning, my coffee now cold in the cup holder. The station house had marked me available, so I drove out there, headlights cutting through the mist that had settled over the low fields. The convenience store was dark, windows boarded, one flickering street lamp out front. In the side lot, puddles caught the reflection of that weak bulb, rippling in the slight breeze. I killed my patrol lights and crept closer on foot, boots soft on wet asphalt. No sign of forced entry at the front door. Deadbolt engaged, padlock rusted shut around the handle. Every false alarm felt personal, like someone dared me to assume safety. I swept my flashlight across the storefront. Display racks still visible through cracks in the boards. A dusty promotional poster for cheap hot dogs peeling at the corners. A keypad lock blinking its own red light above the doorway. No footprints in the soft ground beside the wall, but deeper in the lot, near a dumpster, I saw a dark shape tucked into the shadows. Hand on my holster, I approached, breath shallow. The shape shifted. A cartwheel of empty crates stacked like a makeshift barricade. I circled it, light slicing through the gloom until I saw a pair of eyes reflecting back. "Police," I said. "Step out slow." A man stepped into the beam, shoulders slumped beneath a hoodie soaked by the mist. He looked barely older than a teenager. His eyes were red-rimmed. I could smell the faint tang of fear on his breath. "Please," he said. "My sister. She went in to buy water. She never came out." That explanation didn't fit the boarded windows. No one could get in. "You were here before the alarm went off?" I asked. He nodded, voice trembling. I heard a beep, then nothing. I tried the door, locked. I ran around back. I lifted my light. No back door, just a rusted crawlspace vent, grate welded shut. I eased my gun back into its holster. Nobody's in there. He stared at the locked front door, tears slipping down. But I heard her scream. A scream. I scanned the lot again. No cars, no sounds beyond the faint hiss of traffic on the highway behind me. The vent grating clinked softly in the breeze. I instructed him to stay by the patrol car and advanced alone around the building's perimeter. The field behind was muddy, fence line sagging. I slogged through to the back corner, water soaking through my boot tops. There, flashing in my mirror, was the store's security camera. The one above the dumpster, its red recording light blinking fast, though the power should have been cut weeks ago. I crept closer. The camera's lens was spattered with something dark. I shone my flashlight on it, dried blood, flecks around the edge. I radioed dispatch. Unit 47. Blood on camera at Oakwood Convenience. Request forensics. No response. Probably tied up with the earlier incident. I switched off the beam and thumbed the side of the camera, housing cold metal, and saw fresh footprints leading away, skirting the fence toward the back road. I headed back to the front, checking the ground. The teenager's footprints joined mine, then split toward a narrow path between the boarded-in window and a pile of discarded tires. I followed it, thinking he might have run ahead. The path ended at a service entrance. No lock, just the frame. I shone my light inside. Rows of refrigerator units stood empty, their interior lights dead. The floor was wet, like someone had mopped it, but the water pooled in odd angles, tinted faint red. I stepped in, shoes skidding. The entire store felt suspended in time. Shelves half-stocked, price tags still dangling. In the back aisle, my torch caught movement. Long hair splayed across the tile. A woman's head, cheek pressed to the ground. I froze. "Ma'am?" I called. She didn't move. I knelt, hand sliding toward her shoulder. She turned her face to me, eyes open, vacant, tears dried into tracks down her cheeks. She whispered, voice far away. I couldn't get out. Something wasn't right. She lifted a hand, trembling, pointing toward the back office. I cleared my throat and backed away slowly, holstering my weapon. "Stay here," I said, though her stare was already fixed on me, as if she expected me to solve this. I approached the office door. It was ajar, a single strip of yellow light leaking out. I pushed it open. Papers lay strewn across a desk. Cash register drawers popped open with nothing inside. On the wall, a bulletin board held schedules, notices, and one photograph of a little girl with a bright smile. Missing person poster, corners curling. Underneath, scrawled in pen, "Don't let them find you." My heart skipped. Who was the them? I dipped my flashlight into the corner of the office where a motion sensor lamp hung limp. The sensor lens was cracked. Beneath, on a shelf covered in dust, lay 3 shoeboxes, spattered dark. I leaned forward. Someone had shredded paper, stuck it in the boxes, mixed it with newspaper strips soaked in something foul. I backed away, mouth dry. A sudden crash behind me made me spin. The woman stood in the doorway, mouth open but silent. Tears ran down her face. In her hand, she clutched a key ring with a single brass key, the one to the front door. She offered it to me, lips quivering. I took it, unease curling in my gut. I tried the lock. It turned smoothly. The door clicked open. Outside, the teenager waited, eyes wild. When the door swung open, he bolted toward me. I grabbed his arm. He tugged free and lunged inside. I drew my taser, but it was too late. He vanished into the shadows. I holstered it and radioed dispatch. Suspect fled. Possible accomplice inside. Proceeding with caution. I swept the entire store, aisle by aisle, freezer to freezer, no sign of him. The missing sister gone too. Only the woman remained in the office, rocking on her heels, whispering to herself. I called for medical, for backup, and waited in the cold, silent convenience store. The fluorescent lights buzzed and died one by one, until nothing but moonlight through gaps in the boards illuminated the tile floor. When they finally arrived, the crime scene unit sealed off the entrance. The woman was taken away on a stretcher, muttering about being watched. The keys went into evidence. The boards went back up. The town said it was just two kids playing a cruel prank. The missing girl another runaway, no foul play suspected. I drove away, feeling hollow. Behind me, the little flicker of that lobby light blinked off, and the security camera's red light winked once, then went dark. In my mirror, I thought I saw movement. Two figures passing between the boards. But when I looked again, there was nothing but empty planks and the mist settling over the lot. The night felt thicker inside the convenience store than out in the misty lot. My boots echoed on the tile as I retraced my steps through the aisles. Track marks from my flashlight beam catching every reflective surface. I passed the racks of empty candy and snacks, shelves long since picked clean or boarded up, but something about the way the posters peeled, the way the fluorescent lights still hummed faintly even as they dimmed, made the place feel alive. Breathing. Watching. I paused at the entrance to the back office, where the woman had disappeared with the keys. The door was closed now, a jagged gap where the boards hadn't fit flush. I shoved it open with my shoulder, gun drawn, and found nothing. Papers still strewn, cash register, drawer still open. The missing poster of the little girl still tacked to the corkboard, edges curling. I caught myself staring too long, heart thudding. There was a photograph taped beneath it of another face. Much older, an elderly man with kind eyes. I hadn't noticed that before. Behind me, the flicker of the lobby light pulsed once, twice. I spun, flashlight beam cutting through shadow. Near the front door, a trail of muddy footprints led into the aisle, where I had first found the girl collapsed. I crouched low, scanning. The prints were small, like a child's. They led away, toward the next aisle, then vanished at the frozen food section. I forced myself to stand, moving slowly, conscious of every noise. The buzz of a dying bulb above, a low drip somewhere in the back. I followed the scent of wet earth and something metallic, blood, unmistakably. The footprints picked up on the other side of the freezer bank. I passed the empty ice cream cases, chilled glass fogged with condensation. Then I saw it. A smear across the floor, like someone dragged something heavy. It trailed into the storage room, an off-limits area marked by a simple sign, "Employees only." I opened that door, expecting more emptiness, more stale air. Instead, the beam caught the edge of a makeshift shrine on the floor. Small toys, a cracked picture frame, dozens of chewed candy wrappers piled in a circle around a single battery-operated lantern, glowing dimly. The toys were dusty but fresh. Plastic action figures, a stuffed rabbit missing an eye. The picture frame held a photograph of the same little girl as on the missing poster, her face smiling in better days. Beneath it, scrawled in black marker on the floor tiles, 3 words, "She knows where." My throat tightened. I felt a weight settle in my chest. Who was she? How had someone accessed this room? No keypad, no unlocked doors beyond the main entrance. My radio crackled again, but no voice came through. I tapped the mic. Static was all I heard. I flicked off the lantern with a cautious hand, plunging the storage room into darkness. My flashlight beam darted over janitorial supplies, mops, buckets, shelves stocked with cleaning chemicals. I noticed fresh footprints again, bare, trailing toward a low crawlspace hatch in the back wall. The hatch was unlatched. I pried it open with the butt of my flashlight and peered inside. A narrow tunnel carved just large enough for a person to crawl through. Walls of concrete block, floor slick with moisture. I knelt and shone the beam down into the tunnel. No light beyond. I radioed backup one more time. I'm proceeding into subterranean access. Proceed with caution. My voice sounded foreign in the stale air of the store. I dropped to my elbows and slid into the tunnel. It was cramped, the air thick, like breathing through a damp rag. The concrete walls oozed water in places. My knees scraped on the jagged edge of broken brick. I inched forward, my flashlight beam dancing over scrawled messages on the walls. Stop here. They're behind you. No escape. Each one crossed out, hastily overwritten. My heart slammed. I pressed on, following the tunnel as it sloped downward and curved. The smell grew stronger, faint at first, now unmistakable. Iron and rot. After what felt like an eternity, I emerged into a low-ceilinged chamber beneath the store. My light revealed cracked pipes overhead, water dripping into rusty trays below. In the center, on a stained tarp, lay 2 cots. Thin mattresses, stained old blood, set side by side. One cot held a small body curled in fetal position, covered by a threadbare blanket. The other was empty, the blanket tossed aside. Beside the empty cot, a single sneaker lay half buried in a puddle of water. I shone the light closer to the child. Her breathing was shallow but present. I knelt and placed a hand on her back. She flinched, hot tears on her cheek. "It's okay, kid," I whispered. "I've got you." She looked up, face pale, eyes wide and terrified. "They'll come down," she murmured. "They'll find me." I reached to scoop her into my arms, but paused, because I heard it, soft scraping, footsteps echoing above in the floorboards, low, deliberate. I scanned the chamber, no obvious exits besides the tunnel I came through. The only other way was a rusted hatch high in the north wall, sealed tight with rivets. My radio chirped. Backup? No, static. My phone had no signal. I was alone. The child whimpered and clutched at my uniform. I scooped her into my arms, flashlight pinwheeling to catch the far corner of the room. There, something moved. A shadow shifted where the generator cable ran along the wall. My heart seized. I drew my weapon, training the beam on the dark shape. It lunged forward, stumbled. A man crawled into view, face gaunt, eyes crazed. He wore a uniform similar to mine, patch torn off, nameplate missing. He crawled toward us, panting. "You shouldn't have come here," he rasped, voice gravel in his throat. He reached out, tangled wires around his wrist. "You're a trooper," he said, half smile. He spat something wet, just like me. My finger hovered on the trigger. The child cried out, clutching me tighter. I leveled my weapon. "Get away," I said. He stopped, hands in the air but smeared with dark stains. He nodded to the cot. "She's here because they wanted me to wait." His gaze flicked to the hatch above. "They're coming." Then his eyes rolled back, and he slumped forward, collapsing into the puddle. The wires pulled taut and snapped, sending a spark across the chamber floor. I dropped my weapon and checked his pulse. None. My breath came in ragged gasps. The only sound was the drip of water overhead. The child in my arms buried her face in my chest. "We have to go," I said. I stood, cradling her gently. I felt the walls trembling, footsteps pounding above, running back and forth. Then a muffled voice. Somewhere in the store above, someone shouted in anger. I set my jaw. I turned back toward the tunnel entrance. As I moved, the child whispered, "Thank you, officer." My chest tightened. My uniform was already damp where she pressed close. I knelt and scooped her slippered foot onto my shoulder, bare, trembling. I shook my head once, gathering myself. Then I stood, flashlight between my teeth, and backed toward the tunnel. Behind me, the hatch overhead screeched as bolts ground loose. I moved faster, child in one arm, flashlight and radio in the other hand. The tunnel walls felt like they were closing in. I reached the hatch and jammed my shoulder against it, straining as something heavy slammed onto it from above. The child gasped. Dust rained down. Wood splintered. I shoved harder. Metal bent. Then again, harder. A crack appeared. Light from the lobby filtered down, blinding. With one last shove, I burst into the tunnel, scrambling up, dragging the child through narrow confines. I emerged in the storage room and slammed the hatch shut behind me. My shoulder hit wood with a thud as something thudded against the other side, someone trying to force it open. My chest heaved, child safe but crying softly. I bolted from the storage room through the aisles, dragging her close, flashlight bobbing wildly. I smashed through the office door, yanked open the front door, and raced into the misty lot. The teenager was gone. No vehicles remained. The fog swallowed the stadium lights from the highway, nothing but the faint hum of that distant traffic. I ran to my cruiser, doors and hood locked but interior empty except for flashlight and radio. I set the child on the passenger seat, slammed the door, and leapt into the driver's side. My hands shook as I slid the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. I glanced in the rearview mirror at her, eyes wide in the glowing gauge cluster light, tears streaking down her face, clutching her missing sneaker. I spoke before shutting the door. "Stay there. Don't move." She nodded, hugging her knees. I eased out of the lot, headlights slicing through the mist. Brake lights behind me glowed red as I turned onto the highway. I hit the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I have a juvenile in custody. Rescue from Oakwood Convenience. Evidence of forced entry, blood, possible homicide scene. Need EMS and forensics at location. Suspect unknown, multiple parties involved." Static crackled, then a voice. "Unit 47, acknowledged. ETA 5 minutes. Secure the child." I exhaled, running a hand through my damp hair. My uniform smelled of sweat, blood, and old rot. The child in the passenger seat looked at me, trembling. I kept my eyes on the road, heart still pounding. Behind us, the Oakwood lot receded into darkness, the boarded windows silent, the security camera above the dumpster dark and lifeless. But in my mind, I could still feel the tremor of footsteps, the scrawl of messages on the tunnel walls, the whisper of the man in uniform calling me by name before he died, the echo of the line, "She knows where." And I knew one thing for certain. I would never drive by that exit the same way again. It was 3:45 a.m. by the cruiser's clock when I finally slowed at the edge of town. Behind me, the Oakwood Convenience lay dark and empty, the boarded windows staring like blank eyes. In the passenger seat sat the girl, wrapped in the thin foil blanket the medics had given her, her small frame still trembling. I kept glancing at her in the mirror, pale, exhausted, eyes too wide for someone who should have been home asleep hours ago. I radioed for an officer to meet me at the station with an empty room, soft lighting, somewhere she could rest before Child Protective Services got there. Nobody answered. The static was heavy tonight. I supposed they were all tied up sorting through reports from the warehouse call an hour earlier. So I drove in silence, neon signs sliding past as we left the city limits and entered the low-slung houses on the outskirts. Porches dark, lawns swallowed in fog. When I pulled into the station parking lot, I killed the engine and sat for a moment, door open to let in the cold air. The girl sat motionless, hugging her knees. "Officer," she said, voice hoarse, "I'm scared they'll come back." I reached over and turned off the flashlight mounted on my dash. Its glare seemed too harsh now. I unhooked my radio mic and handed it to her. She looked at it, confused. "Here," I said quietly, "press this if you need help." She nodded, eyes filling again. Inside the station lobby, the night shift sergeant at the desk looked up, eyebrows raised. "What have you got?" he asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "A kid," I said. "Found her under the store. Something bad happened down there." I opened the door behind me and led the girl inside, voice calm. "It's okay, you're safe now." She shuffled in, pressed against me as if I were her only anchor in a storm. The sergeant gestured toward the back hallway. "Interview room B, blankets and water in there." I nodded, guided her down the corridor and through the heavy door. Inside, I flipped on the soft overhead light. A few chairs, a small table, a microphone, a standard setup. The girl sank onto the bench and wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders. I stepped outside the door and closed it quietly, leaning against the wall. In the stillness of the station, the hum of the HVAC felt loud. My radio crackled again, dispatch this time, asking for details on the Oakwood scene. I relayed what I had: forced entry through the boarded windows, blood on the cameras, the shrine in the storage room, the tunnel messages, the 2 cots, the missing pair, the man in uniform and his final words. They asked if I had evidence bags ready. I said yes. They asked if I needed backup. I said no, just someone to watch my 6 once the forensics team got there. Then they signed off. I returned to the office area, grabbed a clean pair of gloves and snapped them on. I collected the keyring from evidence, logged it in, then stood for a moment in the dim corridor, mind racing over the scrawled phrase, "She knows where." I realized I hadn't asked the girl why she was there, who they were, or what she had heard, but I also knew she was too frightened to talk, not yet. So I left her in room B with the radio and a single water cup, and I started sifting through my own notes, preparing to head back out to oversee the crime scene. As I stepped into the interview room doorway again, she looked up, eyes red. "Please," I said gently, kneeling to her level, "tell me what happened to you." She swallowed, blinking hard, then whispered, "I heard footsteps in the crawl space. Then a voice calling my name, not my sister's, not mine, another name." She paused, lower lip trembling. It was the little girl. I stiffened. "The missing girl's name?" I ventured. She nodded. "Emily." "That poster, she's the one on the wall." She nodded again. "They brought her down there. They brought her first." Tears welled. They said I'd be next. My hands tightened into fists. "We'll find them," I said, voice raw. "No one else will get hurt." She looked at me uncertain. "You promise?" I swallowed. "I promise I'll try." As I rose, the hallway light flickered overhead. In the doorway behind me, the sergeant stood, arms crossed. He caught my eye and nodded once. I exhaled and turned back to the girl. "Stay here," I said. "I'm going to get you some food, something warm." She wrapped the blanket closer and nodded. I stepped back into the corridor and flicked off the overhead light behind me. The hallway fell dark, and I sensed movement at the far end, no more than a shadow slipping into the interrogation room. My heart stuttered. I pressed a hand to the wall, steadying myself. Then I flipped on my flashlight. The beam arced toward the interview room door. It stood slightly ajar. I approached, sex trappings of unease hollow in my chest. I nudged it open the rest of the way, door squeaking. Inside, the table was overturned. Water cup shattered on the floor, blanket gone. I shouted, "Hey!" and flicked the light across the room. There was no one there. The radio lay on the bench, the mic dangling. The floor was wet with water, and something darker pooling near the door. I knelt and shone my beam, smeared footprints, child-sized, leading out into the corridor, heading back toward the front door. I leapt to my feet and followed, heart pounding so loud I could barely think. The corridor stretched empty. No sign of her. Nothing but that wet print and the soft echo of my own footfalls. At the end, the lobby door stood open, cool air drifting in. Snow globe of mist blew in from outside. I raced through, scanning the lot. The cruiser was gone. The lights from the city skyline glowed beyond the fog. One street lamp flickered, its yellow cast trembling. No car, no girl, nothing but silence. And in the hush, a soft, distant click, like a camera snapping. I froze, chest tight. Then, in the mirror of the lobby doors, I saw her. A small figure standing behind the glass, drawn as still as a photograph. She smiled, just a flicker, too quickly to be real. Then she vanished. I rushed outside into the mist. The lot was empty. Only the boarded windows watched back, and the security camera above the dumpster, its red light blinking once, then going out. I reached for my radio. Dispatch, suspect eluded custody. Juvenile missing again. Possible abductor still at large. My voice cracked on the word again. As I stood there, the night pressed in. The Oakwood convenience alarm had never rung that second time. No new breaches, no new camera alerts. But I knew, deep down, that this call would never close. I exhaled, breath visible in the cold air, and whispered to the empty lot. Some calls you answer. Some alarms you never silence. I drove away from the station before dawn broke, headlights carving through the fog as the world slumbered. The radio was quiet. No updates, no reassurance. The freeway stretched out ahead, an empty ribbon of asphalt beneath a sky that wouldn't brighten for hours. My coffee had long since gone cold. I leaned back in the seat, closed my eyes for a moment, and tried to shake the tremor in my hands. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun was just a pale glow on the horizon. The yard was wet with overnight dew. The porch light flickered as I climbed the steps. Inside, the house was dark. Sarah and the kids still asleep. I set my cruiser keys on the counter, flashlight in hand, and flicked on the kitchen light. The hum of the refrigerator sounded unnaturally loud. I should have celebrated the rescue. The girl safe, the tunnel collapsed behind us. The man in the uniform dying with that warning on his lips. But there wasn't time for relief, only the emptiness of unanswered questions. I sighed, unloaded my duty belt, and sat at the kitchen table. My notebook lay open. Sketch of the convenience store layout. Diagram of the tunnel, the shrine in the storage room, the words scrawled on the walls. At the bottom, her words, "They said I'd be next." I knew that phrase would haunt me. She knows where. It wasn't just graffiti, it was a message. Someone wanted me to find out. Someone wanted me digging. I rubbed my eyes and pressed my forehead against the cool wood of the table. A soft chime from my phone made me blink. A text. "Need update?" from the sergeant at dispatch. I thumbed out a quick reply. "Girl's safe. On hold until forensics clears scene. Then, I'll be in tomorrow." I hit send and stared at the screen. Tomorrow. 2 more calls to answer. 2 more alarms that wouldn't silence. I stood and shuffled through the living room, flicking on the lamp by the sofa. Family photos lined the mantel. Sarah smiling on our wedding day, the kids playing on the beach last summer. They looked so normal, so safe. I ran a hand through my hair and flicked off the light. I didn't want nightmares tonight. Not after what we'd seen. I scanned the hallway for the glow of the kids' nightlight. I paused outside 8-year-old Lily's door, the soft lavender light seeping through the crack. Lily had dreamed of being a police officer, just like Daddy, she'd told me last week, eyes bright. I pressed my palm against the door and swallowed. I couldn't let her know how dangerous it could be, how trauma hides in shadows and tunnels. I ducked into my room instead and collapsed onto the bed. Sleep came in fits. Images of that little girl, eyes wide in the dim light of my cruiser, the boy under the tarp, the man in uniform calling me friend. I woke gasping, the edges of the ceiling spinning. I lay there until the first hour of daylight, then rolled out and dressed in silence. By 7:30, I was back at the station. Forensics had combed the Oakwood convenience. The cave-in had collapsed the tunnel beyond repair. They'd found Emily, her real name, treated her, then slowly released her to child services, who promised therapy and a warm bed. The man in uniform remained unidentified. His fingerprints were burned off, his badge missing. They assumed he'd been a former officer, perhaps a disgruntled veteran, but nothing conclusive. The sergeant caught me in the bullpen mid-morning. He offered me a fresh cup of coffee, black and strong. I declined. He nodded as if he understood. "We've got nitrile gloves ready for you," he said. "Body cams cleared?" I nodded, eager to get back to the site before the day crew wiped everything out. Back in the cruiser, I punched the Oakwood address into the navigation system. The streets were quiet at this hour. The baker's shop was just opening, lights spilling onto the sidewalk. The boarded windows of the convenience store faced me like a pair of hollow sockets. I parked on the far side of the lot, engine off, and watched for a moment. The security camera above the dumpster still hung there, its housing cracked, no recording light blinking. It was as if it had never turned on. I stepped out, slipping on gloves, and crossed the lot. The boards had been reattached, sealed tight, padlock newly installed. I ran my fingers across the wood, fresh nails, sharp edges. Someone wanted to hide it again, bury the evidence. I searched the perimeter. No signs of entry, no footprints beyond my own from last night. The blood had been cleaned, no trace of it on the concrete, the dumpster, or the lone street lamp base. Whoever did it had been thorough. I circled back to the side entrance, where I first found Emily huddled. The ground there was level, no footprints, no sign she'd ever been there. I knelt and pressed my gloved hand to the dirt. Normal, unmarked, just grass. My chest tightened. I tried to picture the tunnel entrance, the shrine and storage, the scrawled messages. All of it gone. The earth erased their path. A soft crunch made me spin. A small black sneaker lay half buried in the grass near the curb. The same sneaker I remembered from the underground chamber. I haven't found a second. But here it was, slick with dew, laces frayed, size small. I knelt and picked it up, heart thundering. How had it emerged here? Who placed it? I clutched it and rose, searching the lot again. No one watched. The world remained silent. I drove back to the station, placing the sneaker in an evidence bag. Photography, fingerprints, DNA, pieces of a puzzle nobody wanted solved. Back at the desk, I filled out forms, wrote notes, but my mind drifted back to the text on the tunnel walls. They're behind you. Stop here. No escape. And beneath those, crossed out, she knows where. Something told me Emily did know. She'd led me there, then vanished. The boy under the tarp, someone's first victim, and Emily's first witness. The man in uniform, perhaps once a protector, then a slayer. All threads unraveling into a tapestry of fear and control. I closed my eyes for a moment at the desk, pinching the bridge of my nose. I'd need sleep, but I knew it wouldn't come easy. There was one last thing. I had to check my cruiser. I locked up and walked out to the parking lot. My patrol car sat under the harsh glow of a floodlight. I approached, careful. The driver's side window was streaked with something dark. Smudged finger trails. Someone's frantic attempt to trace letters. I pressed my glove to the glass and wiped gently. Under the smear, words etched into the dust. I'm still here. I stepped back. City lights of downtown glowed behind me, traffic humming in the distance. The station behind me was empty. My heart raced. I reached for my radio, my belt. I kept my eyes on the cruiser, and nothing moved. The words lingered in the glass, mocking me. I thought of Emily, alone in the tunnel, rescued but still haunted by whoever they were. I realized the girl had not escaped them. They'd let her go, watching. They'd shifted their game to me. I exhaled slowly, chest tight, and placed a hand on the roof of the cruiser. The metal was cold. I could feel the tremor in my fingers. The sun was rising, but it wouldn't matter. Daylight or darkness, it made no difference. The alarms I answered would never stop. The calls I chased would never close. It was 2:49 a.m. when the console pulsed to life. A tiny amber LED blinking insistently beside the words, Zone 7, Side Door Sensor. I'd seen enough of these to know what they meant. A silent alarm, nothing more. I leaned back in my chair at dispatch, rubbed the ache behind my eyes, then keyed the mic. Unit 14, respond, code 2-1-2-4, Jefferson Plaza for alarm activation, no other details. My cruiser rolled down empty streets under sodium yellow street lamps, the wipers whispering against the windshield as a soft drizzle began. I thumbed the patrol radio off and settled into the steady hum of the engine, telling myself it was just another false alarm. Jefferson Plaza was a rectangle of low-roofed storefronts, deserted at this hour. Chain-locked doors, darkened windows. A convenience store, a dry cleaner, a small appliance repair shop. All closed, all alarmed. I parked under a flickering light near the rear entrance of the hardware store. The sensor had tripped on the loading dock door. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped down onto the wet asphalt. The beam cut through rain curtains, illuminating nothing but puddles in the back of the metal door, locked, undisturbed. I tapped my radio, quiet. Rear door secure, no sign of forced entry. I'm going inside. I slipped the building key into the padlock, felt the cold click as it turned. Inside was that familiar mix, the tang of dust, the faint mechanical whine of the exit sign overhead, and the hollow echo of empty aisles. My boots thudded on concrete. I swung the flashlight left and right, scanning metal shelves lined with tools and hardware, screwdrivers, drill bits, spools of wire. Nothing moved, no stray cats, no drifters, just rows of merchandise and the soft drip of water from a leaky pipe somewhere in the ceiling. I walked to the front of the building, fanned out my bearings. Here, too, was locked glass, but the door was latched. I tapped again. All clear ground level. My voice sounded distant in the cavernous room. The dispatcher's calm acknowledgement came back over the radio. Then I climbed the stairs to the small mezzanine office above. 2 desks, an old computer terminal, a nightlight I switched on. The beam caught on a framed photograph. A family standing outside that same hardware store, smiling in daylight. Kids on bicycles, a dog at their feet. I never knew whose life was recorded there, never gave it a thought until tonight. I moved past the desk to inspect the safe. It sat bolted to the floor, hefty and unyielding. Inside would be the day's receipts, perhaps $10, $20. Nothing big. My gut told me a rat would trip the motion detector before a human ever did. And then I saw it. A dark smear on the floor beside the safe. A streak of something that hadn't been there before. Glossy, almost black in the flashlight's beam. I crouched low. The sheen caught again when I tilted the beam. A smear of blood, a single drop trailing away toward the aisle. My chest tightened. I stood too fast, the flashlight dancing across the concrete. No footprints, though, just that smear, as if something dragged itself away. I called for backup. Dispatch, this is Unit 14. Possible blood trail on mezzanine between safe and aisle 5. Requesting additional units. My voice was steady. I didn't want to scare the dispatcher, or myself. 15 seconds later, tires squealed outside. Lights spilled in through dirty windows. 2 partners joined me upstairs, Richter and Lons. Richter clicked on his light, scanned the black stain. That looks fresh. He knelt, pressed a gloved finger to the edge. I watched him stand, ajar with tension. We stared at the line of droplets leading into the darkness. "Clear back door," Lons said, voice hushed. I walked at 10 feet, nothing more. He flicked his light toward the stairwell. "Did you find anyone in the store?" I shook my head. No movement downstairs, no signs of a break-in, no broken glass, no pry marks. I felt heat rise beneath my collar. The rain had stopped outside, but I could feel my forehead damp. Richter tapped the ceiling. Motion detector's still live. Doesn't make sense. He lifted his light higher, peering into the shadows. "Get me the building manager's number. Let's see who's supposed to have the code." We retraced the drop trail toward the office door. At the threshold, the light angle changed, revealing a smear on the door's edge. Fingertips pressed into the paint. It looked like a hand had tried to steady itself before pushing the door open. We exchanged glances. I keyed the radio again. "Dispatch, we have possible forced internal movement. Everyone hold position until I check the floor above." The stairs creaked under my boots as I climbed alone. Above was just a storage loft. Packed toolboxes, cardboard boxes labeled "Winter Sale," coiled extension cords. No windows, no exit. Just the low hum of a water valve. My light beam bobbed over crates until it froze on a chair that hadn't been there earlier. A folding chair placed at the center of the loft. I clicked off the radio. My throat went dry. The chair faced the wall, back turned. I circled it. Through the slats, I thought I saw a shape draped over the seat. A coat, maybe a jacket, tossed aside. I shone my beam straight at it. The coat lay empty but soaked, and beneath, an indentation in the dusty floor, the outline of a body. A soft stream of blood pooled in the groove. I crouched and pressed my gloved hand to the fabric. It was saturated, cold. My lungs tightened. I whispered, "Fuck." Behind me, Richter's voice crackled. "You copy?" I swallowed, straightened. "I need an ambulance and coroner." We called it in. As we waited, I kept glancing at that chair, at the empty form it held. No sign of the occupant. The descending drip of blood left me imagining movement, like someone had slipped free and vanished. When they came, EMS, coroner, CSI, the plaza lights flickered off and on, like a dying heartbeat. The managers arrived later, bleary-eyed, claiming the alarm had gone off twice this week for no reason. Tonight, they said, must have been a wiring fault. They didn't know about the blood. In the report, I logged silent alarm activation. No forced entry. Discovered blood evidence on mezzanine and storage loft. No suspect located. Scene turned over to coroner's office. I never wrote that I found a woman's earring downstairs. A single small hoop near the front door, still warm in my gloved hand. Or that I kept wondering if she'd sat on that folding chair before vanishing. If she'd reached out to me without words. I drove home through thinning fog, tired fingers on the wheel, replaying the dripping. In the distance, the hardware store's sign glowed its cheery red, oblivious to what had happened. Inside. And I knew I would never look at an alarm the same way again. I didn't sleep much after that first call. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the aisle lights blinking off and on in my mind, heard the soft drip of blood echoing in the silent loft. By dawn, I showed up at the precinct 2 hours early, numbing my hands in hot coffee and staring at incident reports I'd already filed. But when the dispatcher keyed the next alarm through, I answered on reflex. It was 4:03 a.m. at the old West Side High School, Zone 12, Gym Hall Motion Detector. I'd been through that hall countless times on routine checks. Nothing ever happened there besides rats and squeaky floorboards. I slung my jacket over the chair, grabbed my flashlight, and headed out. The ride was quiet, the city's heart not yet beating properly. I kept my radio off until I pulled onto the cracked asphalt of the school's parking lot. Playground lights were dead, save one flickering above the gym entrance, greenish haze leaking through gaps in louvered vents. I unlocked the side door and slipped inside. The gym smelled like old sweat and mildew, a faint tang of rust on metal. My flashlight beam caught the scoreboard high above, its zeros dark and blank. Bleachers were tucked away, walls lined with peeling murals of champions from decades before. I clicked my radio. Unit 14 on scene, checking gym interior. My voice sounded too loud. I lowered it. No foot traffic, nothing unusual. I advanced across the polished floor, boots whispering on varnished boards. One of the overhead motion sensors was still blinking red, though no one was there. I circled the center court, flashlight cutting arcs. Then, in the corner, by the wall mats, a single drop of dark fluid glistened where the beam found it. I crouched, stomach knotting. Not paint, not rust. Another drop, then another, tracing a line toward the locker rooms. I called it in. Richter rolled up 15 minutes later with Lance. We traced the drops into the row of wooden lockers. Doors closed, some slightly ajar. Inside one, I saw the heel of a scuffed leather shoe sticking out. I pried the door. A man's jacket lay folded over the bench, sleeves tucked neatly under its body. No one inside. The locker was stained along its bottom hinge with the same dark streak. Richter said, "Whoever it was, they were dressing here." He shuffled his feet. Maybe a kid playing pranks. He sounded so sure. I wasn't. I felt the weight of those same questions I'd held at the hardware store. Why the neat folds? Why the absence of a body? We checked every locker, opened every stall. Nothing. No footprints in the dust. No signs of rampage. No obvious point of entry into the school. Doors were locked from the inside after hours. Camera footage showed no recent passers-by on the courtyard. It was as empty as the moon. Then, at the far end of the hall, past the concession stand, the emergency exit light buzzed faintly. The door, metal, heavy, was cracked open an inch. I flicked my light on it. Raindrops trickled in even though the forecast called for clear skies. Tiny rivulets ran in, pooling on the floor. At the threshold, another smear. I could taste the coppery tang in my mouth. I stepped through. Outside was the running track. Bleachers half collapsed, weeds cracking through the asphalt. No footprints in the dirt. I followed the building's exterior wall toward the front entrance. My flashlight caught on a smear of blood against the brick mortar, streaked like someone had dragged themselves along the wall. My heart banged in my ears. I radioed backup again. Possible victim removed or fled school. Traces of blood, no body. I gripped the door jamb as I turned back toward the gym. I tried to ignore the whisper of wind through broken windows, the soft drip behind me. When Lance arrived, he flicked on his light and frowned. It's like she was here, then gone. No sign of collapse, no tire tracks nearby. He tapped his radio, requesting canine units. By the time they arrived, the dawn gray had crept across the sky. A canine team walked the perimeter, dogs searching for scent. They marked corners, then paced aimlessly, disinterested. No alert. We stood on the track, surrounded by empty stands, the gym behind us silent. Richter broke the quiet. You ever think these alarms, they pick up more than motion? Like maybe something that doesn't want to be found? He was teasing, but I felt the weight of it. I nodded, unable to speak. I kept thinking of the chair in that hardware store, the missing girl, the neat earring. I thought of the gym, of wet footprints that went nowhere. I thought of her in a locker, folded like laundry, then vanished. At shift change, I filed the report. Alarm activation. Gym motion sensor triggered. Traces of blood in gym, locker room, and emergency exit. No victim located. Canine search negative. Scene secured. Same sterile words. No mention of the pulse in my throat, the dread crawling under my skin. That afternoon, I sat in my cruiser during a break, staring at the school from across the street. A janitor wandered in, doors clicking shut behind him. He locked up the building, unaware of last night's ordeal. I watched him vanish inside. By evening, I was restless. I drove past the old hardware store again, saw the sign shining in the dusk. It blinked like a heartbeat. I remembered the mezzanine, the loft, the chair, the blood, and I thought of alarms. Silent cries echoing through empty spaces, calling for witnesses who never arrived. I answered my phone when it rang. It was dispatch. Zone 3, motion at Roche's warehouse. You up for one more? I paused. My fingers hovered over the ignition. I felt the ache in my spine, the cold flash of memory in my veins. Then I drove east toward the docks, headlights cutting through industrial shadows, the radio humming softly, because alarms don't rest, and neither do memories. I pulled up beneath a single floodlight outside Roche's warehouse. It was 11:57 p.m. I stepped out, rain beginning again. I clicked on my flashlight and walked through the yawning metal door. Inside, crates towered like tombstones. The exit sign glowed overhead. My beam danced across crates stamped with shipping codes from another continent. No lights on, no one around. I advanced between rows, each footstep swallowed by vastness. Then a sound, a quiet drip. I turned. On the floor, by a stack of pallets, a thin line of crimson snaked away, leading toward a gaping ventilation grate. I knelt, hand pressed to the stain, still warm. I felt a pulse in my wrist, matching the rhythm in my head. I summoned Richter again. By the time he arrived, I'd traced the bloodline to the grate. It was ajar, a fingertip-width opening. I pried it open. The beam crawled down into darkness. I knelt and shone it inside, nothing but shadows. I thumbed the radio. Possible victim inside ventilation shaft, no sign of entry point. Then I climbed inside after calling for a tow to unbolt the grate. Shoving past cables and insulation, I felt the walls close in. My light found imprints and dust on the shaft side, hand and knee marks, like someone had crawled, inch by inch, into oblivion. I radioed, Dispatch, body not found. Evidence of traversal. Request, hazmat, structural. As we waited outside, I kept thinking. The hardware store girl, the gym phantom, now this crawling figure. I pictured her in the shaft, dragging herself away from the alarms call, pulling the pane behind her, into darkness. When they finally sealed the grate and reopened the warehouse, there was no body. Only a section of torn sleeve caught on a support beam. It was gray fabric, thin. I bagged it. That night at home, I lay awake in bed. I imagined all the alarms I'd ever answered. Sensors tripped by wind, by rats, by wiring faults. But maybe, I thought, they're the last mechanical pulse of someone's terror, someone's desperate plea. Maybe the sensors hear more than footsteps. Maybe they hear fear itself. I closed my eyes, but the images wouldn't stop. The silent store, the empty chair, the gym locker, the open door, the warehouse shaft, the torn sleeve. And somewhere beyond the walls, beyond the calls, someone moved in the dark, unreported, unexplained, unclaimed. I wondered if I'd ever answer an alarm again without hearing her ragged breath in my ear. Then my phone rang. A different dispatcher voice. Unit 14, 1302 Cedar Road. Zone 5, garage motion sensor. I sat up, heart thundering. I grabbed my coat. I thought about the chair, the locker, the shaft. I thought about the women who slipped through the gaps, left nothing but traces of blood and unanswered alarms. I stepped out into the night, flashlight in hand, resolve hardening in my chest. Because if they won't be found, somebody has to look for the chair, the earring, the memory. Somebody has to answer the alarm. I pulled up to 1302 Cedar Road, just as the line between night and dawn began to blur. The motion sensor in the two-car garage had tripped at 1:03 a.m., silent alarm to dispatch, dispatcher to me. I parked on the cracked concrete apron, the beams of my headlights skimming over rusted trash cans and a single bicycle propped against the wall. The faint glow of the street lamp outside cast long shadows through the garage's translucent windows. I stepped out, rain from earlier traced rivulets down the edge of my jacket. The garage door was down but not fully closed, an inch at the bottom, a crack wide enough for a slender arm. That wasn't normal. I clicked on my flashlight and nudged the door with a toe. It juddered open. No welcome mat, no clutter around the threshold except a scattering of tire-shredded gravel. Inside, the garage smelled of oil, motor coolant, and something metallic. Iron, copper, dried crimson. My beam cut through the gloom to reveal two vehicles, a dark sedan parked perfectly centered, and a beat-up pickup closer to the wall. The floor was swept clean except for a thin smear by the edge of the sedan's driver door, blood still tacky. I crouched, pressed my gloved finger to the smear, then touched my forehead. I found myself breathing shallow. I radioed in. Unit 14, garage at 1302 Cedar Road. Door ajar. Possible blood at driver door of sedan. No sign of owner. Richter and Lance arrived within minutes, their boots slipping on the smooth floor as they took in the scene. Richter moved to the control panel by the interior door, codes scratched on a sticky note. He tried the code, the keypad beeped, and the door clicked open. The interior was dark, lights off, except for the dim red of the alarm's strobe. Lance trained his light on the pickup's bed. Tarp edges flapped gently, though all windows were shut tight. I edged toward the sedan, shined the beam through tinted glass at the front seat. A pair of gloves lay on the passenger floor, neatly placed. My fingers tightened on the flashlight handle. Gloves don't wear themselves. I opened the sedan door. The hinges squeaked. Inside, the seatbelt fastened around empty upholstery. Drip marks on the leather, and on the dash, a small scrap of paper pressed against the windshield. I leaned in to read it. 4 digits, 1892, written in shaky script. No context, no message. I flicked it into evidence bag, perplexed. I glanced at the other door. More smears leading in irregular patterns toward the utility door at the back of the garage. I followed them, foot by foot, as they twisted around the corner of the pickup and ended at a set of storage cabinets. The handle was slightly ajar. Metal rattled softly when I nudged it. Inside, antiseptic bottles and paint cans lined the shelves. Between them, folded cloth. A gray sweatshirt soaked at the hem. I tugged it free. The cuff was torn, frayed. Richter pointed at the adjoining door. That leads into the kitchen, right? The house's floor plan flashed in my mind. Garage to mudroom, then kitchen. I swallowed. Yeah, I radioed. Dispatch, interior check. Possible blood trail into house. We moved in formation, flashlights and sidearms ready. But the mood was different from prior calls. There was purpose here. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling gutters. Inside, the kitchen was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. The floor tile was clean, polished, but more droplets glistened in my light. A breadcrumb path. I followed, heart pounding. The path led beneath the island counter, then veered through the living room. I passed a mantel with family photographs. 2 smiling toddlers, a young couple at a wedding rehearsal, a dog with a tennis ball. I hesitated. The blood was fresh against the white carpet edge. I knelt, studied the pattern, small drops, larger smears, as if someone had tried to steady themselves, then collapsed and crawled. I called for a med unit, anticipation and dread knotting my stomach. Possible victim inside living room. No obvious entry wounds visible yet. Lance signaled me forward. He peered toward the hallway leading to the bedrooms. I heard something, he whispered. We both paused, listening. Nothing but the hum of the fridge and the distant creak of settling walls. I inched into the hallway. The floor was hardwood, glossy, but flecked with more spots leading to the master bedroom. That door was closed, simple knob. I pressed my ear to it. Behind, low sound, ragged breathing. I knocked lightly, announcing, "Police!" No answer. I turned the knob. It yielded. Inside was dim, curtains drawn. Moonlight filtered through gaps, stripes on the floor. The blood trail ended at the side of the bed where a heavy quilt was pulled back. I moved the flashlight beam over the mattress. Crumpled sheets, a shoe half under the bed, and her. A woman, mid-30s, hair splayed, face ashen in the pale light. Blankets soaked. She lay on her side, eyes half open, unblinking. I knelt beside her, careful not to disturb anything. She was breathing, shallow, labored. I felt a flash of panic I hadn't allowed myself before. I bit my lip. No visible wounds, no gunshot, no slash, but the quilt was red at the edges, as though she'd been dragged or had drifted in her own blood. Richter stood behind me. "We need medics here now," he said quietly. I stayed at her side, took her hand. It was cold. I whispered, "You're safe now," though I wasn't sure it was true. Outside, sirens wailed. Lance blocked the hallway, keeping it clear. I watched paramedics spill in, working swiftly. Pulse checks, oxygen, gauze. They lifted her onto a stretcher. Blanket pulled over her head. I stepped back, heart thundering. The moment they rolled her out, I saw it. On the bedroom wall behind the bed, streaked in crusted blood, a series of numbers scrawled in haste, 2.49 and 4.03 etched next to each other. The times of the other calls, and beneath them, today's alarm time, 1:03. I stumbled back, stomach lurching. Someone had cataloged each incident. No bodies found, only alarms and traces, and then themselves. Richter noticed my stare. "Looks like a record," he said. "Some kind of diary." I knelt, rubbed my eyes. My reflection in the window showed shadows under my eyes like cracks. I pressed my hand to the glass, tracing the times scrawled in barely legible red. Did she write them? Or someone else? I turned away to meet Richter's gaze. Neither of us spoke. The dispatcher's voice came over the radio. Code 4, medial unit transported victim. Scene clear. Richter exhaled. "I'll finish the report. You want to stay herded for a bit?" I shook my head, voice tight. "I need air." I stepped through the open doorway into the cool night. The garage smelled again of coolant and concrete. I looked back once at the house, the kitchen light blinking off behind drawn blinds. Then I glanced skyward, stars beginning to fade as city lights took over. I thought of the hardware store, of the empty chair, the high school, of the vanished girl in the locker, the warehouse, of the shaft with no body. Now of her, alive, but marked by the silent language of alarms and blood. I flicked my radio on. Unit 14 returning to station. As I climbed into my cruiser, I felt something shift in me, an unspoken promise that this wouldn't end here, because each alarm was a question, each drop of blood an answer that went unheard, and I was the only one left to listen. I put the car in gear and rolled down Cedar Road, headlights cutting a path through silent houses, my hands steady on the wheel, mind racing. Somewhere ahead, an alarm would trip again, another silent cry waiting for someone to respond. And I would be there, because I couldn't stop hearing their voices. The pager buzzed in my coat pocket 2 nights later. Zone 9, Rural Residence Motion Detector, 224 Willow Lane. It was 2:18 a.m. By now, I'd learned not to wait for backup before checking a motion alarm. I grabbed my jacket and flashlight, climbed into the cruiser, and drove east into the country. Streetlights faded behind me, replaced by the orange glow of my dash, then by pitch-black fields broken only by the occasional farmhouse window lit like a lonely eye. Willow Lane was a narrow dirt road skirted by scrub pines. I slowed to a crawl when the garage-mounted motion detector light pulsed in the distance, outlining a single-story farmhouse with peeling white paint and a sagging porch. The sensor's glow kept cutting out, as if the bulb itself wanted to deny the world. I parked on the grass, stepped out into cold air thick with the odor of wet earth and rotting pine needles. My boots sank into the mud as I walked up to the front door, locked as expected. I flicked on my flashlight, swept the beam across the porch. A rocking chair sat empty, rake leaning against a potted fern that had seen better summers. No footprints led away from the stoop. The porch boards looked undisturbed. I tapped the doorframe for movement. Nothing. I opened my palm mic. "Dispatch, Unit 14 on scene. House secure. Checking interior." Inside, the house felt wrong. It smelled like old smoke and something cloying, like flowers left too long in a vase. My light bounced off faded wallpaper, bare floors scuffed by years of use. I thumbed the light toward the living room. A fireplace with no logs, a mantel lined with oil lamps, and a single cracked photograph of a child I didn't know. As I passed, I heard a soft creak overhead. I paused. The ceiling fan blades shifted, as if brushing air too slowly to be noticed. But it hadn't been on when I entered. I told myself it was the house settling. I forced a breath out and moved on to the kitchen. The sensor that had tripped was above the sink, where a pale puddle of water reflected my flashlight's glare. I bent to inspect it. No leak. Instead, fingerprints pressed into a glass tumbler abandoned on the counter. 2 fingerprints in dried red, matching the color of the water puddle. I touched my glove to the rim, sticky. My radio crackled. "You copy, Unit 14." It was Richter. I acknowledged him and motioned through the doorway. He and Lance entered moments later, kneeling beside the tumbler. Richter frowned. "Looks fresh. Who the hell sits drinking in the dark here?" His light caught on the edge of the countertop where the fingerprints ended in smudges that led to the stairwell. I climbed the narrow stairs first, light dancing over a threadbare runner. On the second-floor hallway, a single bulb flickered solo, its sway creating shadows that pulsed like a heartbeat. The blood-tinted smudges trailed along the bottom step into the master bedroom. The door was cracked just enough for the beam to slip inside. I nudged it open. Inside, the bed was made. But the pillows were peeled back in disarray, and the sheets had been yanked taut, revealing a pattern of stains. Not huge pools, but enough that the mattress sagged under their weight. The bedside table's lamp was turned on, casting a shallow pool of light over an open journal. I picked it up. Its pages were filled with neat, cursive entries cataloging each alarm I'd answered over the past week, complete with times and locations. Beneath the last entry, today's 2:18 a.m. Willow Lane, entry 6, then a new line. "He comes." My blood chilled. I looked up at the lamp, its shade tilted, as though someone had moved it. I spun around. Nothing. My breath rattled. I closed the journal carefully and tucked it under my arm. Richter's quiet voice came from the doorway. "Found something downstairs." He held up a child's mitten, blood-spattered, utterly out of place. I stared. The photograph downstairs had shown a smiling boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old. If that mitten belonged to him, then he'd been here, not upstairs, but somewhere else. We trailed back down to the sunroom off the living room, where sliding glass doors opened onto a dead garden. The floor in front of the doors was smeared with footprints that stretched into the yard. I shone my flashlight outside. The grass pressed flat as though someone had crawled across it. Ahead, the motion detector light flickered on and off, illuminating bare earth and the roots of a tree. Beneath it was a shape, partial, low to the ground, like clothing abandoned in the dark. I stepped forward. My beam revealed the dark sleeve of a jacket caught on a tangle of roots. I grasped it and pulled. Heavy fabric, stiff with blood. I held it up. No body. I could feel my heart hammering as the wind rustled the pines behind us. Each leaf sounded like a whisper. As I examined the roots, my light caught on shallow indentations in the dirt, imprints of knuckles, then elbows. Someone had dragged themselves from the house, perhaps toward the woods. I realized the night was too quiet. No birds, no insects, just the hum of the motion sensor and the drip of water from the gutter above. I radioed for a perimeter search. Dogs? Any help? They arrived. Canine team, park rangers. We fanned out into the darkness, flashlights darting over brambles and mud. The dogs nosed the ground, whined, but then retreated, barking furiously at nothing. My partner placed a hand on my shoulder. "They're not picking up a living scent," he said. "Whatever we're looking for, it's gone." I frowned. Or it never wanted to be found. I led the team back to the front porch. I sat in the rocking chair, the one on the porch, and stared at the house. The dripping trees, the empty fields. No movement, no windows lit. Only the dead lamps and the journal entry in my pocket. "He comes." When we sealed off the house and loaded evidence, no one mentioned the mitten or the journal. In the report, I wrote, "Motion detector triggered at Willow Lane." No signs of break-in. Blood evidence tracked from kitchen to master bedroom. Child's mitten found. No occupants located. Scene turned over to investigations unit. I sat in my cruiser afterward, tears prickling behind my eyes. I thought of the boy in the photograph, of the missing jacket, of the words, "He comes." I imagined him, wherever he'd crawled, his fingers scorched by brambles, his small voice silenced by the night. Finally, I drove away from the farmhouse under a sky just beginning to lighten. At the edge of the woods, I pulled over, sat in silence. Somewhere, sunrise was approaching. But here, the air was still too heavy with the weight of unanswered alarms and vanished lives. I couldn't tell when the sky turned from ink black to slate gray, but the windows of my cruiser fogged over, and my breath came in shallow clouds as dawn crept near. The pager was silent now, no more alarms scheduled until tonight, but my mind was still keyed, hypersensitive, nerves humming. I drove slowly back toward the precinct, the county roads empty except for pale street lamps fading one by one. Inside the station, the fluorescent lights were already buzzing overhead as the night shift crew filed in to clock out. I watched them shuffle past my desk, yawns and coffee in hand, unaware of what I'd seen. I tucked the evidence bag containing the journal under my arm and opened the logbook to write my final entry. The cursive on those yellow pages weighed more on me than any typed report ever could. 6 calls. 6 silent alarms. 6 places where a trace of blood lingered. And 1 living woman, pulled from her bed in the dark, cataloging my responses as if I were part of her story. I swiped the journal's cover and stared at the neat rows of dates and times. Each entry ended the same way. No suspect located, no victim recovered, except for her, and she was gone again by the time I left the house. If she'd been alive when I found her, where was she now? And what, had been keeping those pages? I leaned back, pressing the heels of my palms into my eyes, trying to clear a relentless ache behind my forehead. Lieutenant Marcos approached, slinging a jacket over his shoulder. "You heading home, Banks?" he asked. He always called me by my last name when something looked off. I straightened, closing the logbook. "Almost," I said. "Just wrapping up." He nodded and peered down at the journal. "Find anything worth noting?" His tone was light, but I heard the weight beneath. He knew. He'd seen the CCTV from the hardware store. He'd covered the paperwork on the high school incident. He'd heard the stories. "I found her again," I admitted, voice low. He raised an eyebrow. "She left town, same as the others. No trace." I tapped the journal. But she wrote it all down. Each alarm, each blood smear. Marcos took a breath. "Think she's cataloging us? Testing us? Wanting to see if we'd notice? Or warning us," I said. "Telling us that alarms aren't random, that they're connected." He studied me and then the journal. "Leave it here for evidence processing," he said. "Take a break. Go home." I nodded and rose, shoulders stiff. As I walked past the briefing room, I glanced at the whiteboard. Morning bulletins, scheduled patrols, bullet points for the next shift. Below them, scrawled in dry erase marker, handwriting jagged and familiar, were 6 times and locations, matching the journal. 2:49 a.m. Jefferson Plaza, 4:03 a.m. Westside High, 11:57 p.m. Roche's Warehouse, 1:03 a.m. Cedar Road, 2:18 a.m. Willow Lane, and newly added this morning at 5:01 a.m. Station House. I stopped cold. Station House, this very building. My heartbeat echoed in my chest. I leaned closer. Underneath that last entry, the first fresh line I'd seen, "See you soon." My breath caught and I spun, half expecting to see someone behind me in the corridor, someone watching. But it was empty. Tile floor, beige walls, coffee stains on the bulletin board. The station clock ticked 5:03 a.m. 2 minutes past the time on that marker. I backed away, stumbling into the hallway. My radio lay on the desk, but I didn't reach for it. My hands shook. I thought of her handwriting, that desperate chronicling of alarms and blood. the note that led me here. Downstairs, the lobby doors were locked for the night shift's end, but the janitor's key hung on the wall. I slid it free, my reflection in the glass door panels twisted and tired. The early light had shifted, a pale bruise on the horizon. I stepped outside into the cold. The front porch light flickered, casting my long shadow onto the sidewalk. No blood, no glove, no hint of movement, just concrete and the station sign above me. I pressed my palm to the doorframe, feeling its chill through the glove. And then I heard it, the beep of the alarm panel behind me, a single chime signaling activation. I turned. The keypad next to the door glowed red. Zone 1, front entrance sensor. My cruiser sat idle in the lot beyond. No motion should be detected here. My pulse slammed in my ears. I drew my flashlight and approached the panel. There were fingerprints around the edges, small, slender prints coated in dust, then swiped clean where freshly pressed. I lifted my glove to the panel, touched the sensor. It hummed under my fingertip. I looked down at my shoes. No blood, no smear, but above me, on the glass transom, scrawled in the same dark red hue, "For you." My knees buckled. I dropped to my haunches, radio forgotten on the desk inside. The morning breeze rattled the station sign. The front doors remained locked, unmoved. I pressed my forehead to the glass, tracing the letters with the tip of my flashlight. My reflection flickered behind me, blurred by those words, and then the transom cracked, a thin spiderweb of fractures racing outward, though no stone was thrown. I jolted upright and stumbled back. The silent alarm's LED blinked faster, a frantic pulse. I hardly heard my own gasp as I reached to disarm it, but I couldn't move. The cold glass pressed against my chest. The beep turned into a rasp. I closed my eyes and opened them again. The glass was intact, no cracks, no writing. Only my breath fogging the pain and the alarm's light continuing its steady blink. I stepped away, heart rattling. I wouldn't file this. There would be no report, but I'd seen enough. 6 alarms, 6 sites, 6 smears, one final message. For you. I walked back inside, slamming the door behind me. The hallway lights flickered off, then on, as if acknowledging my presence. I reached for my jacket and radio, and then I heard it. A soft drip, drip, drip coming from the ceiling vents directly above the front lobby desk. I hesitated, backbone stiff. The station roof was sound. No leaks on the maintenance logs. The drip continued. I looked up. In the grill, a single dark streak ran along the metal edge. Fresh, as if someone had pressed their fingers there. My radio was on the desk, its speaker crackling. It emitted one more tone, soft and familiar, before static. I stood alone in the lobby, flashlight shaking in my hand, listening to that drip echo in the silent station. And I knew I would never step out again without watching my back. Because the alarms weren't done with me. They never would be.